Hey everyone, welcome to Love, Rinse, Repeat, a podcast recorded by me on the unceded sovereign lands of the Gayo people. My name is Liam Miller. I'm a minister in the Uniting Church in Australia, and this is episode 100. Can you believe it? We've made it episode 100, recording live. I mean, we always record live. Recording at night, that's rare. Recording with good friends, new friends, past guests, new guests, and we're doing something very exciting today. Before I do, I should say, Love is Repeat is supported by a vital leadership team, is part of the Uniting Church Synod of New South Wales and ACT. Thank you for the support. So today, for episode 100, I was humming and hawing and trying to work out what was the best thing to do. And I've come up with it. It's a Bible bracket. So if you ever heard of March Madness, this is Bible Madness. We've got a 64 team single elimination tournament. How do 66 books go into 64 slots? You'll see soon enough. But we've got a wonderful panel. We're going to basically put books of the Bible against each other in a matchup 1v1 and work our way through until but one remains, and we can definitively and finally ultimately say what is the best book in Holy Scripture. So that's what we're promising you here in episode 100. So thank you for tuning in. The bracket itself, for anyone who wants to follow and play along at home so that you can be particularly annoyed when we don't choose your favorite book, in the show notes you can get the bracket. So look below there, and it's an Excel document that you can play along at home, and then later on, gather your friends and family on Zoom, and you can do your own Bible bracket and tell us what won using hashtag Bible bracket. Wow, really nailed that one. All right, so let's meet the panel today. They were all on mute, but if you were watching the video stream, they were rapturous in response to that great hashtag. So we're going to meet each other. We're going to introduce ourselves. So Amanda, I've known you the longest. You can lead us off.
Thanks, Liam. Yeah, so my name is Amanda Hay. I'm a minister of the Uniting Church in Australia. It's my first time on Love, Rinse, Repeat, so thanks for having me. And I'm excited to be here. I'm so excited that I flung my Bible off my desk in anticipation. So thanks for having me.
Welcome. Brian, I'm just working around my screen now.
Yeah, thanks, Liam. My name's Brian. I'm a ordained minister of the Congregational Christian Church, Samoa. But I'm currently here at the University of Divinity. Just recently submitted my dissertation, my PhD. So the anxious wait. But yeah, I'm here on. Want to acknowledge that I'm zooming in from the land of the Wurundjeri people, Kulin Nation, otherwise known as Melbourne. And my dissertation was Hebrew Bible, Old Testament. So if this gets too long, we can always just cut out the New Testament.
Thank you, Brian. And Brian's been on the podcast before. You can check out his previous episode, Talanoa with the Old Testament, from I don't know, several months ago. Go look for it. I think it's in the 60s. Steff?
Hello, thanks for having me. I am co-pastor of New City Church, and I've banged on a little bit about this in a previous episode on this podcast, which was really fun. We talked about building pillows and embodying division. So I'm someone who identifies as queer and genderqueer, so my pronouns are they, them, and I bring that sort of to my experience of pastoring and trying to create a safe place. We have a very beautiful, inclusive, justice-focused community that's trying to do things a bit differently, which is exciting and incredibly healing too. And I think a lot of us are trying to dredge through the baggage of weaponized scripture. So, talking about the Bible and actually loving it and voting for some books that we like. I'm excited about getting through that. One thing I just wanted to mention quickly is I'm also at University of Divinity, and I'm writing a master's thesis at the moment. I hope to get to the same point as you, Brian, soon, of submitting a thesis on masculinity, male entitlement, and gender expansiveness in the Gospel of Matthew, particularly Matthew 19 and eunuchs. So get ready for me to really fight for the Gospel of Matthew at that point.
I love it. This is great. Rowan.
Hi, I'm Rowan Salmond, and I am a religion media person. So I work for the ABC in the religion and ethics unit for Radio National on a show called God Forbid. But I guess I'm technically compelled to say that I am here only on my own thing, and I'm not representing the views of the ABC. I also run a newsletter, an online newsletter in my own time called Modern Relics, which is about religion, the internet, and popular culture.
That's a blast. Thank you. Rosie.
Hi, I'm Rosie Clare. I am a PhD candidate at Western Sydney University in their Religion and Society Research Cluster. So I'm not here as a pastor or a divinity student. Not that Western Sydney would have opinions on the Bible, I don't think, but my opinions are entirely pedestrian and not formed by any theological training other than about 5 units of a Moore College PTC many years ago, which I'm sure sets me up in good stead to know most of what I need to know, right?
Absolutely. I don't think more knowledge is necessarily best knowledge in a thing like this. This is my one question before we get in, and we're about to get in, but I want to know who here has read all of the Bible.
I have read all of the Bible, but it was the Message translation. So did I really read it at all? I don't know. No,
you read more words than you needed to. I think probably. If you read the Message.
I'm also somebody who has not gone to theological college, so I wouldn't know that for a fact.
I think I've preached a few sermons, and I think I've covered most of them. I think Jude is the only book I haven't covered. Is it Jude? I mean, Jude, yeah. But whether I've read the whole thing, that's another question altogether.
I don't think I've read the whole Bible. I've read some books of the Bible many times. But okay. I don't think I've ever read Habakkuk.
Yeah.
Or others.
So I think over the span of my life, I've probably read the Bible. I am an extreme extrovert, so reading the Bible by myself, it has always been a real struggle, and a lot of evangelical guilt as well. That this is the one thing you get told to do every week in the sermon is go and read your Bible and pray each morning, and I was just I'm such a bad Christian.
Crazy talk.
But then I also think reading the Bible the second time through, at this point of my faith, I'd like to say I haven't really engaged and read the Bible for the fruitful, lovely worth that it is. I probably read it at a point where it was just boring and disengaging, but I'm looking forward to getting through the Bible again now that I'm at this point in my faith.
Okay. Amanda?
Yeah, I think, throughout my life, I have read the entire Bible. Whether I've engaged with as much of it as I think I have is another question. So I guess we'll say.
Yeah, I have not, but I just make the claim that I'm a systematic theologian, so I only need 7 verses, and I think you just build it from there, right? You just get that, and that's your way to the races. All right, so we're going to get started. Content warning, alcohol. If people would know that every Love, Rinse, Repeat episode for all 100, I think, has started with a opening of a can, which I recorded one time, even though the motif of the show was about being in a shower and practicing conversations in the shower. But I did a can because I thought the sound cool. But here we go, for the first time ever, live on air, cracking a cold one. All right, we're getting underway. So get your brackets open. Here's cheers. So for those who don't know how about brackets work, you have 64 teams broken up into 4 regions. Each region has seeded 1 through 16, 1 being the odds-on favorite to win that bracket, 16 being the least likely one you could see possibly making it all the way through. There can be upsets, of course, but that's how it kind of goes. And so 1 versus 16, 2 versus 15, etc., etc. So that's how we're working. We're in the first region now, the Western region, if we're using kind of sporting terminology, or if we're going to try to make up on the spot a kind of biblical Christian region. Let's call this the Nicene region. And so this is the top left one if you're looking at your bracket at home. So our first matchup team is the Gospel of Mark versus the Epistle of Jude, the letter of Jude. So Mark versus Jude. Who you got? How does it shake out?
I'm going to vote for Mark.
I agree.
Mark, it's the shortest one. It's to the point. You've got a socially justice active Jesus who's doing a whole heap of stuff. Mark, definitely.
Yeah, and I think with Mark, when you watch a show or watch a movie and you hate the ending, well, at least with Mark, you've got two endings. So if you don't like the first one, go to the second one.
We've got the Schneider cut of Mark.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to go with Mark too, but shout out to Jude for being strong on good doctrine, I'm
sure if I preached on Jude, it'll get my vote, but I haven't.
It really would have set a tone if someone had come out really strong for Jude early on. someone had picked a lane of how they were going to play this. All right, so Mark goes through. Our next matchup is 8 verse 9, Ezekiel versus James. So it could be a bit of a tougher matchup here. Ezekiel versus James, valley of dry bones, or woe to those who are rich. Let's pick your fight.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to put in a little bit for who are James? On one of my favorite, values, which is the sin of impartiality or favoritism. So I love that James says that, and a whole bunch of other likewise statements. So for that reason, I'm going to be voting James.
Okay. Yep.
You might have swayed me a little bit there, Steph, but I've got to go Ezekiel, man. It's epic. There's bones, there's angels, there's a whole heap of stuff. It's a blockbuster book.
I gotta support Amanda here. Sorry, Steph, but Ezekiel. I just as a person who is a diasporic identity here in Australia, there's so much that Ezekiel resonates with me, and I think it's not just diasporic people; it's also people that are being displaced, people that don't seem to fit in. And Ezekiel has made a transition from learning things in a sort of set spot. Now they're existing in exile. They've made a move to ethical learning and ethical living. So therefore, there's this transition from being, set in a particular place. Now they're existing in between spaces. So for me, Ezekiel, that's why Ezekiel gets my vote, because as a person who's sort of removed away from their home, so a person that exists between spaces, I think Ezekiel speaks to me in large volumes.
Big case, mate. Big case. Rosie, you look about to jump in.
I mean, that is a huge case for Ezekiel. And I feel like my main knowledge, there was that awesome worship song that was randomly in a minor key, which worship songs never are, dry bones and which it was great. It had just amount of kind of Andrew Lloyd Webber drama going on. You can imagine it on the electric organ. But unfortunately, I'm going to vote for James. And mainly because it was a really meaningful book for me when I was in high school. Read it multiple times at youth group, have read it at youth group, led it at youth group, similar to Steph talking about the ideas around the sin of favoritism. But I just think that for me as a kind of teenage Christian, James was really accessible in the way that in the instruction there, the things around faith without deeds being worthless, what James had to say on perseverance and faith was just really helpful, I think, in me being a young Christian person and getting my head around the Bible.
Mm-hmm. Oof, it's close. It's gonna be
It
tight,
is
though.
close. I was hoping that it would come down one way or the other, so then I could just go with the majority. I'm actually going to start keeping a list of books of the Bible I haven't read in a long time, and should probably return to, because I think this is probably a good opportunity to have those stand out to me. I do remember reading James as a teenager and being really impressed with what I found there, but that was one of the books where I was thinking back and couldn't really remember a lot of what it contained. Whereas Ezekiel, the fairly dry bones and the, breathing life into the bones, and like that image has been so evocative. I will give my vote to Ezekiel, but I am writing down James so that I can read it and then possibly regret ever saying this.
All right. So, look, there's a few reasons I'm going to make this decision. One is it would have been great if more of the New Testament had followed a wisdom tradition. Two, you got to love the shade that if we're accepting the tradition of the church that James is the brother of Jesus, it's a power move to write your epistle and not name your brother once, like the center of the faith. And you're just like, name's not showing up in my letter. And also, I want to vote for James because now
It does, right at the opening.
Oh, Biggie, he doesn't show up he's not bringing him, not name dropping him across the letter. It's just, he's just, freewheeling out there with his own thinking. I mean, I love it. And I also want to go vote for James because now it's 3-3, which means we're going to, the essentially very biblical practice of casting lots. We're going to flip a coin. So
can I just sneak in one more thing that might sway the vote here? One of my all-time favorite movies, Pulp Fiction, Ezekiel 25, verse 17. Samuel Jackson quotes in that movie.
That's a good argument.
One of the best lines. Anyway, I thought I'd just sneak that in there.
It's good. It's good. I'm still going to flip the coin. So heads is Ezekiel, tails is James. All right, here we go. Tails is James. Ooh. I am sorry to Ezekiel. That was a hard fought. That was hard fought.
I want to inspect that coin once you're done with that. Thank you, Liam.
Yeah, if it keeps coming up. So next time someone can call it in the air, which will totally work really well on Zoom. So, all right, up next, the 5-seed Samuel. How am I going to fit 66 into 64, you asked? It's because Samuel and Chronicles, I think, or no, maybe Kings. Samuel and Kings I grouped, which, is following what they, are in the Torah anyway. So Samuel, both books of Samuel versus, I did with Chronicles. Okay, that makes sense. Samuel versus Chronicles, both books of Samuel, both books of Chronicles. What do you like best, the original or the really paled down, diluted remake? I'm voting Samuel. And I'll make a case for Samuel as my Cinderella story of this bracket that I'm going to hope goes deep into this bracket. But I'll save that for a matchup where I think it is needed. So I'm going to vote Samuel.
I'm going to follow you on that one. The story of Samuel hearing, the quiet voice of God. I think about that all the time. So
yep,
I vote for Samuel.
Right.
Yeah, I'm voting Samuel as well because, Samuel sort of gives a more balanced picture, I guess, for the lack of a better term. Whereas Chronicles seems to give you only the good news. If you want the full story and the full picture, I think Samuel does that, whereas Chronicles sounds a bit like your premiere at this stage, only the good news.
Brian did promise this that the anti-Sydney rhetoric would come out at one point. It came out earlier than I expected. Went right for it. All right, anyone?
Yes.
Yep.
Basically, my view of Chronicles is it's a more boring version of Kings. Sorry, Chronicles. And also 1 Samuel 2 has a very significant passage, which is Hannah's song. So this barren woman who, is overlooked by the men in the story, one of the only female voices named, who actually proclaims this psalm of God's mission and justice in the world. And then in our Gospels, Mary's the Magnificat then, mirrors that. So for me, it's just hands down Samuel for that beautiful psalm of Hannah's.
Great. Does anyone, I'm going to assume everyone's happy with Samuel?
I'm happy with Samuel.
All right, great.
My best friend has done a lot of work on Samuel, so I feel like I would be a traitor to her if I didn't vote for Samuel. But also I just think, Samuel is narrative driven. Both books of Samuel are narrative driven, and I find, as a reader, that takes my vote over Chronicles. I'm with Steph. It's a lesser version of Kings.
Right. Yeah. And Amanda's nodding. Great. We are going to go next to the 3C, the Gospel of John, verse the 14C, the letter of Titus. Anyone want to jump in early? Anyone? We don't even have to. We can save what we're going to say about the Gospel of John to like a later round when it's up against someone. Is anyone going to make a case for Titus? I'm seeing you shaking heads. No. All right. Titus is gone. Gospel of John goes through. We can say more about the Gospel of John when it goes against Samuel in the next round, which I think will be a tough battle. All right. Number 4, a 4 seed Acts, the Acts of the Apostles versus the Philemon, the 13 seed Acts versus Philemon. Do you want, this is length versus brevity, but let's see what comes out here. Who wants to jump in?
Is this just another hands down to Acts, or?
Oh yeah, I mean,
no. Yes. Brian's got something to say.
Brian might be making a case with.
I don't know. I love the story of Philemon. The slave, right? There's just a lot of. I guess I'm sort of fighting an uphill battle here, but just to give some sort of flavor towards Philemon, but it's a very short book, so that's one of the benefit. I mean, you can read that in one sitting, whereas Acts you probably need a couple of sittings. And yeah, it's just that story of Paul trying to convince the slave owner to take Philemon back, and to take Onesius, is it the slave back, and it's just it's a beautiful. A problematic relationship going on there, and I think that it's something that anyway, I'm saying a lot when I know X is going to win.
It's a beautiful eulogy though, Brian.
Okay, take it as a eulogy.
I might contribute to the eulogy a bit because I think I still have to give it to Acts, but Philemon is I think one of the more interesting small books in the Bible, not just because I think it's the smallest, but just the way that it's been interpreted over the years, both problematically, but also kind of in a way that increases liberation of where this slave owner and the slave are really, it's like you are brothers actually. And I think that is really profound. And so it's worth mentioning, even though, Acts is just like a rollicking good read.
Yeah, it's I think Philemon is obviously inspired lots of really good, interesting scholarship, both in terms of trying to wrestle with what exactly is Paul trying to do, and what exactly was this relationship, and maybe what does it signify to Paul's broader view about slavery. And then for folks who listen to the podcast, Joseph Marshall, who did written Appalling Bodies, has an incredible chapter on Philemon, and he links that to questions about slavery and slave play and BDSM. It's so for inspiring that alone, I think Philemon for a lot of us is the scrappy underdog, the small town team who's come in. They're gonna get crushed, but let's take a moment to appreciate them, appreciate their journey here. Great that they made it to the big stage, and we'll move on with Acts of the Apostles, unless anyone else is jumping in really quickly to say something else.
Well, I just want to jump in to say like that Rowan's like tagline for Acts should get more airplay, and that, you know, the Acts of the Apostles, you know, a rollicking good read, you know, for the singles editions of it, I would buy that.
Great. All right.
It's my little blurb that goes on the cover.
Yes. Well, we can work on that for a lot of these books, really, you know, our pitch in a blurb. All right, we're coming down to three more matchups in this region. We have Jonah versus Lamentations. Jonah versus Lamentations. I feel this is someone's darling is going home in the first round, and I'm sorry for whoever that is.
Jonah for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I just think that it's one of those stories that everyone knows. They're all too familiar with it, and there's just so much in there. I mean, when you read it for the first time as a kid, or whatever the early stage of your faith is, comparing that to how you read it now, I'm sure there's a large distinction now of how you read it, and I'm sure there'll be many more ways of reading it. It's just one of those books. It's just action-packed, and some of the themes in there. Sione Haver wrote an article a couple of years back on Jonah, and I think the title of the article was Adjusting Jonah. And in that article, he actually thinks that from a post-colonial point of view, or an anti-colonial point of view, we should actually be feeling for Jonah and not letting Nineveh off the hook so much, because after all, in the ancient context, Nineveh were the great colonists, and we tend to let them off the hook in that story. So I think Sione serves us a reminder that we need to remember who the colonial parties are in that text, and I think that was brilliant. So yeah, Jonah for me.
Okay, Jonah for Brian.
I'm also going to vote for Jonah. I mean, I want to say that I doubt I've read all of Lamentations. I know that it's so important that our biblical tradition has any kind of lament in it whatsoever. So, and I want to acknowledge that, but I'm still going to vote for Jonah. Interestingly, I actually wrote on Jonah in my master's degree, which is bizarre, but there you go. And again, that idea that Jonah has been interpreted to mean so many different things, I just think says, you know, this is such an interesting book that we can't dismiss. This idea of that, like throwing that, you know, that it became, you know, like this almost warning sign to sticking with orthodoxy, you know, that if you ran the wrong way, you were like rocking the boat of orthodox belief through to all sorts of various interpretations. You have kids' Bibles that don't include the last chapter of Jonah, so you never see an angry Jonah, which of course again changes our relationship to God. So I suppose sticking with my, you know, lament is important. I think the last chapter of Jonah is important, where you see this angry Jonah just being like, God, I don't get it. Like, I am furious, you know, that you haven't destroyed Nineveh. And I'm so angry. And I think this image of being angry at God, and God kind of being like, yeah, but I do what I do, you know, you know, I'm bigger than you, and my picture of justice is bigger. Yeah, I just think that Jonah has a lot in there. It's a really powerful story, and also the VeggieTales movie is amazing.
Can I'll also vote for Jonah, even though I think there's a strong case to be made for Lamentations. But I just want to say that, like, the whale does loom large in that story. But I just want to give a little shout out to the worm that eats the that kills the plant, and that Jonah gets so angry about, and you know, but he never had the plant in the first place, and so it's not actually up to him. I think about that worm quite a lot, and like especially in the context of like coronavirus stuff, where I feel very hurt and angry and upset that I have missed out on, you know, certain things, but that was never really mine in the first place. So I think about that worm possibly more than the whale at the moment, at least.
That's fantastic.
Absolutely. I've got to go with Rowan with the worm, and Lamentations, I think, is really important. So shout out to Lamentations. I know that we're all feeling a little bit of that book deep in our souls during this lockdown. But for that worm alone, I've got to give my point to Jonah.
All right.
So just a little bit of a eulogy for Lamentations is that Dr. Elizabeth Bose does a wonderful reading of Lamentations through a hermeneutic of trauma. Everyone's sort of agreeing with me on the screen here in this podcast. But for those who don't know, she kind of talks about how the fragmented voices and the sharing, the voicing of shared pain and kind of working through hard things that happen in life and then together kind of coming to a voice of hope at some points. That communal narrative of trauma is probably something we can all identify with 6 people in lockdown here on the screen. Just a little shout out to Lamentations.
Yeah, I have to agree with you there, Steff. I feel a bit conflicted, because I'm really good friends with Liz, and she might think I'm betraying her at this stage, but it's just so difficult.
Oh.
But yeah,
you
sorry,
do have
Liz.
you do have to consider.
We might change our minds and be like, no, wait, I want Lamentations.
Huge. The tide swung. Yeah. You do have to consider interpersonal relationships in a contest such as this. But all right, so Jonah goes through. Everyone said great points, but so I won't say anything more. All right, the next one, Esther versus the first letter of John. 1 John versus Esther. Ooh, stumped.
So I'm torn because Esther has so much discrimination against women in the book. Women subjected to physical altering for the king, sexual slavery. So I'm just like, that's a really awful story. And a woman using her sexuality in order to get to a place of prominence where, no man is really helping her, arguably. So I'm like, it's a pretty horrible story. And I've read a reading of Esther contrasted with women who were in sexual slavery in some of the world wars, and sort of a comparison reading. So for that, Esther is a pretty hard book. And then you've got 1 John, which is talking about the importance of love, if I'm correct, and is just a very beautiful book about love. So you've got an important story that is kind of spotlighting abuse and systematic abuse, and a beautiful book of love. So I think I'm kind of torn.
I'm gonna put my vote for Esther, sort of because of what Steff's saying, because they are absolutely correct about the depiction of women and the sort of portrayal of women as well, and the treatment, but the resilience of women also is such a powerful image in the book of Esther, and it doesn't even begin with Esther. For me, it begins with Vashti. I remember growing up as a kid, and we were taught to sort of dislike Vashti before being a rebel. But now, with a more sort of critical view of the text, I absolutely love Vashti, for sticking to her guns, for showing resilience, and for standing up for what she believed in. It's funny that she doesn't actually suffer any consequences as a result of her resilience. You would imagine that after she rejects the king's orders, she would probably get, cast away or maybe even murdered. But then she just disappears from the narrative. which to me, you could read that a certain way, but for me, I'm reading that as if she's won that battle, because she hasn't suffered for that action that she committed. So I can see the resilience of women as well in Esther, in the midst of all the horrific stuff that happens. And yeah, that to me, that's why Esther gets my vote.
I was going to say I didn't have a strong opinion, and maybe I still don't have a strong opinion. I think that, you know, there is beautiful text in 1 John. Like, linguistically, 1 John is a beautiful book, and all those different ways of thinking about how we know what love is, and like that kind of like, this is love because like we know that God is love, and we're in God if we love one another. And I think there's these beautiful text in, certainly the English is beautiful. The English translation of 1 John is linguistically beautiful. But I think that I without having come to this with a strong opinion, I feel very convinced by Steff and Brian's arguments that actually the things that make Esther horrific are exactly why we need to keep Esther, because I think it's really important that we have a record of like that this is what happened, and that God saw this, didn't necessarily approve of this, but that was still there and present and working through these scenarios. And I think that's an important thing to remember.
I 100% agree with Rosie, and just to say that it's not just something that has happened, but continues to happen. And so the way that we can read the book of Esther is the reclaiming of these women's stories, not only in the past, but also in our present, and unfortunately into our future.
I think I'm convinced. I was going to say 1 John just because I've always liked it, but I agree.
It's wild. We're knocking out God is love in the first round.
I mean, I know
point it said in Scripture. It's now no longer there. It's now no longer there. You don't have it anymore because we've decided we want them. This is a very 2021 choice. I feel like we need the mess and the awfulness. And I think for all very valid reasons. I love it.
Well,
I think
it's a given, isn't it, Liam? God is love. So
right.
we need other texts to remind us of all that, as like Rosie and Amanda were saying, to remind us of the reality that we're facing.
Yeah. I think that's really well said, and I think there's something maybe coming through with this group is I think there's definitely a leaning toward narrative and story that's playing out a little bit in I think some of the votes so far. So, all right,
is that a bit offensive to the systematic theologian?
Oh no, I love a story.
We've also still got, like God is merciful, God is compassion. We haven't got rid of any of those verses yet. So, plenty of room for great declarations of God's character.
All right, good. And John is, there's 2 more letters of John. We'll see if they can scrape through. Or they're going to get swept in round 1. So our final matchup in this region is the 2 seed Genesis versus the 15 seed Obadiah. Unless we can save anything we want to say about Genesis for now, because unless anyone wants to make a case for Obadiah, we'll just sweep this one through and talk about Genesis next round. All right, Genesis goes through. How could it not? All right, we are through the first round. We're going up. Going up into the top right hand, which we'll call the Chalcedon region. And our first matchup over here is the Psalms versus the second letter of Peter. Look, we can kind of do what we just did in the last one. Is anyone making a case for the second letter of Peter? Otherwise, we could save what we want to talk about the Psalms. Great. We'll save that for the next round. The Psalms are going to be a heavy hitter. I think that's going to be a real hard to beat pick. All right. The 8 seed Numbers versus the 9 seed Micah.
Sorry, I was on mute, but I was just going to say, I do like the letters of Peter, but the Psalms is just a no-brainer.
Yeah. The people might want to question my seeding here, that potentially my personal love of the book of Numbers has bumped it up to an 8 seed, which I'm sure others would be like, that's an easy 14, 15 seed, Liam. But I really like the book of Numbers. We have this, I'll make a case for it first, and then people can jump in what they want to say. That the book of Numbers starts with this census. Here's everyone in Israel. And then everything goes on and then it ends with a census, and not one name remains the same, right? Across the book of the wilderness, an entire generation of Israelites have been buried in the sand. And then we move forward, and it's this mix of rebellion and distrust and angst and just everything under the sun of just the mess of what it is to be, humans together on a long road trip, and the collapse that comes through that. But always along the way is the provision of God and the presence of God. And there's a particular reading on it that comes from some Jewish strain, which kind of always talks about the great privilege of the wilderness generation, that unlike any other generation before or after, they lived kind of in this complete removal from all the external stresses of the world, and essentially just lived in the immediate presence and provision of God in that time, until they all were laid to rest in that desert. So that's my pitch for Numbers, but anyone can either jump on that or counter it and tell me why you want the book of Micah. I mean, it makes better t-shirts.
I mean, there are potentially enough other minor prophets who advocate for justice and against the idolatry and the, abuse of the poor that we could let Micah go and let you have Numbers, Liam. But I'm not sure if anyone wants to push back on that.
You don't have to pander to me.
Steff, was that you pushing back on that? Because I don't have a strong opinion, but if that's your case for Micah and we just need to vote on your case or Liam's case, I'm okay to go with that.
I think you'll see that every time we reach certain books, I'm going to be conflicted because of certain friends that are sort of like, this is their book. So shout out to my bro Anthony Reese. He's the Hebrew Bible lecturer there at UTC, and he's done some really good things of Numbers, especially the depiction of Moses and Moses' masculinity, which makes the book of Numbers really interesting, because before I just thought it was just a book of census, and it was just a list of names, but then growing up and reading it more, there's just all these different sort of themes that make it really interesting. And just the depiction of God, when you compare Numbers to Exodus, Exodus has a more sort of slow to anger, quick to love type God, whereas the God in Numbers lacks a lot of patience. The moment the people of Israel mess up in the wilderness, bang, off with their heads. So it's a different depiction of God, and for me that makes it interesting. And I think we need to keep Numbers there to sort of balance out God as love and this God is just this wicked being in the skies that vents God's anger upon God's creation, that type of thing. So yeah.
But we got rid of God is love. We got rid of
we got Psalms there, so
I've got to say Numbers, if not just for the wacky story of Balaam and his donkey. It is one of my favorites. It was one of the most obscure when I was growing up. I loved telling it. So it's got to be Numbers for all of those amazing reasons, plus Balaam and his donkey.
That's a very convincing argument to me. I will also go with Numbers.
I'm doing my victory dance. I'm doing a victory dance because Numbers got through. All right. I mean, Micah is great.
With consensus, Matt, I
know. I wow. Hope I can't believe I strong-armed everyone into that with my initial pitch.
Shout out to Micah, though.
Yeah, Micah is great.
Social justice.
Yeah.
Really good.
It's a good book. All right, we're moving on to the 5-seed Jeremiah versus the 12-seed Proverbs. Jeremiah versus Proverbs. Very different vibes, I'd say, between these two books. And so, yeah, who wants to jump in?
These two books together, man. These are one of two of my, they're not my favorite, but I love these books. Jeremiah and Proverbs. I mean, as a person that's done a lot on wisdom. I have a natural affinity with the Proverbs, but there's just so much in Jeremiah as well. And I don't know. I think I'm going to stay loyal to my affinity with wisdom, and go with Proverbs. But man, I wish Jeremiah was up against another book, because I love Jeremiah as well. Anyway, actually, right. I'll wait and see what everyone else says, and then I'll vote. But yeah, I'm leaning Proverbs, but if everyone can sway me towards the other, then I might vote the other as well.
All right. I'll just say I love a proverb, and some of them are also kind of kooky, and you don't hear those ever read out in church, because I think to a modern ear they're quite funny, and then I don't know, was the author intending to be funny? Maybe.
My favorite. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you go in.
What is my favorite of that is there's a great proverb of like a man, like there's like one which basically is a proverb about how like you're such a sucky person if you say something mean and then say just kidding. Like there's a proverb about that, and like, I mean, we need more of that. So like, just to Rose's point, you can find some funny, interesting stuff in there. Sorry, Steph.
I was just going to say, I love the depiction of the femininity of wisdom, and I think that's why I would probably advocate for Proverbs to stay in at this point, and that tradition of lady wisdom, and just the idea of, wisdom coming and having a home, and bringing the wisdom down into the world. And I vaguely forget how it all comes together in wisdom and the overarch of Proverbs, but that'll be my case for Proverbs.
I'm also voting for Proverbs. I have like a whole spiel on why, but I feel like I want to keep it for when I have to fight for Proverbs.
hold it. I'm surprised here. I really didn't think Proverbs, and not that I don't like. I just one of those ones in your head, because I didn't try to run them through too much in my head beforehand. Didn't think Proverbs was getting through, but it's getting through.
But shout out to Jeremiah. That was my vote. And I just, the imagery, the planting your gardens in places that are not your own, from making a home in spaces where you're not comfortable anymore, finding place and finding community and finding identity outside of what you once knew. I think that's really important. I think we all tend to be creatures of comfort who cling to what we've always known, and we were never called to do that. And Jeremiah is just a story of people who are trying to work out who they are now in these foreign lands. And so, look, Proverbs is cool. I'm happy it's going through, but shout out to Jeremiah.
I was kind of hoping that, we got to a stage where Jeremiah did go through and we all be going, Jerry.
The things we miss out, that you just cannot have it all. No, Jeremiah is great. Thank you for that eulogy about it. That was great. All right, well, we're moving on. We're moving on to Galatians versus Zephaniah. Is anyone going to make a quick case for Zephaniah, or are we just going with Galatians here? Okay, we're running through. Galatians gets through, and we can talk about why we love it later or hate it or whatever. So the next one, I did pair these together deliberately. Song of Songs versus 2 Timothy. Pick your sexual politics.
Song of Songs. I will take
Song of Songs
any day.
All righty, Song of Songs going through. We could talk more about it in the next round. Hosea versus Nehemiah. Hosea versus Nehemiah. Claire?
I'm going to vote for Hosea. It's actually, full disclosure, it's a long time since I've read Hosea, but there was a time in my life about 10 years ago when someone had just broken up with me, and for whatever kooky reason, Hosea was the book of the Bible that got me through. It was probably entirely inappropriate, but I really appreciated it at the time, and it was like just the right level of messy and confusing, and all the stuff about Hosea being told to marry a promiscuous woman. And I just, I need to read it again. I probably might change my mind if I read it again, but it was very important at the time. So my vote goes to Hosea.
I remember like pretty early on in maybe my first Old Testament unit in my theology degree, I think it was an Elizabeth Schussler Fiorenza article on language in Hosea, of maternal language in Hosea, and kind of talking about how it's so often obfuscated in translation. But like this idea of God bending down to lift up Israel to nurse, this idea of God's womb and God as mother, and like that, how this great argument for why that was really the very explicit reading of the text, that this maternal language comes through. Is that enough to offset all the other the marrying a promiscuous woman thing? I think so. I mean, also Nehemiah is like all about sending like foreign women away, so it's not like that's we got problematic against problematic in some ways. But I think that article was so formative for me, that reading of Hosea and the maternal language in my early biblical studies and theological education, that I'm gonna just focus again. That's the prerogative of me. I get to focus on like the one chapter. That's great. I'll take that, and so I'm gonna go. I'll also vote for Hosea.
Yeah, this is really difficult because, as you say, like Nehemiah is where the foreign wives are forced to be divorced, and so we've got that going on, and then Hosea is like, I will strip the woman and parade her in the street as punishment. Mm-hmm. So I'm like bad egg against bad egg, really, and I just think it's going to come around to the next round for me. Mm-hmm. So happy for either one to go through.
Yeah, I mean, shout out to Nehemiah. I mean, it's one of those, as you were saying, Liam, when it brings up the issue of xenophobia in the Bible, and those type of issues, we can't just sort of sweep it under the carpet, right? We need to engage with books like that bring up those type of attitudes, so that we're aware that the Bible does have a lot of controversy that extends to even, xenophobia is just a sort of nice term for racism, isn't it? I wish it wasn't pitted up against Hosea, but I think this is a book that should maybe have survived in the second round, because it's just, it's good to have those negative attitudes so that we know that there are these things that make us conflicted that we need to engage with.
Nehemiah has the reading of the law, right? There's that scene in Nehemiah. I'm sad to lose that. That's a beautiful scene where like all of Israel is finally gathered back in their land after being in exile so long. And Ezra stands up and reads from the law, and there are people there interpreting, and everyone's just weeping because, like, here you are hearing your holy text read in your freedom again for the first time, hearing the story of freedom as actually freed people, and they're weeping, and then they go, look, go and celebrate and share what you have with those who don't. Like that scene is one of my favorites, and I've preached on it a few times. It is very rich. It's the highs versus the lows. That's the thing. There's some good highs in both, and some deep lows.
I think I'm going to vote for Nehemiah, just to clarify. Because Brian, I think you're right. It does bring up these really good conversations about the anti-multiculturalism, anti-foreign people, that is really necessary when we're engaging a human text.
I mean, there's still Ezra. I think we haven't got Ezra yet, but there's a similar text. So I don't know who Ezra's pit up against, but but we could sacrifice one.
Amanda or Rowan, it might be coming down to getting closer.
I confess, until you were just talking about both books, I could not remember what was in either of them, so I did not have a very strong opinion. I'll give it to Hosea, I think.
Mm-hmm. And I'm giving it to Hosea as well, because I know that we've got Ezra coming up.
So is it Hosea? Wait, we've got three versus. Wait, hands up who's voted for Hosea. 1, 2, 3, and hands up who's voted for Nehemiah. Oh, and I was saying I was voting for Hosea. I swayed myself when I remembered the scene.
Well, we've got Ezra to come, so I think I'm content with.
We're going to put Hosea through. We're going to leave it Nehemiah. I mean, hopefully Ezra's up against something he can beat.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're really in trouble. All right. Well, Ecclesiastes versus Leviticus. Ecclesiastes versus Leviticus.
Why do we need to vote?
Oh, it's got to be Ecclesiastes, right?
Ecclesiastes, 100%.
It's like, yeah, it's just so good.
Yeah.
Great. I don't hear anyone
It's
dissenting.
the only book that was written by a 21st century author.
It is very postmodern, you know.
That was great.
Nothing
All right.
new can be said. Everything's been argued before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like Leviticus is a really important book, even though, you know, there's a lot of bad exegesis, even though there's a lot of questionable exegesis of Leviticus, and a lot of us, myself included, just don't know what to do with a lot of it. I mean, it's, you know, I am not going to give a eulogy for Leviticus. I am not qualified to do that. I'm happy to see Ecclesiastes go through.
I mean, Leviticus is where you're going to get like love God and love neighbor. Like that's right in the heart of it. Like, you know, and Mary Douglas has the great thing about Leviticus working as a concentric circle, that it gets more important as you get to the middle, and then less again as you get out. And right in the middle is that love God, love neighbor. So, you know, it's a rich, but very like has caused so much pain. But anyway, it is Ecclesiastes. So
We've still got Deuteronomy.
Yeah. The heart of the Torah. So, you know, we'll hold it for that. All right. Yes. And then the last round matchup in this round is Ruth versus 3 John. Look, no one's voting for 3 John, right? No. Okay. So Ruth is going through and we can save a fight for that against Ecclesiastes. Oh, that'll be interesting. Do you want to choose hope or vanity? All right, we're moving down. We're moving down into the bottom left as you look at it. I promise, folks, once we get out of the round of 32, like things might speed up a little bit, but we'll try to burn through some. Hopefully everyone's having fun, or this is, you know, just for us. Who knows? All right, so, we need a name for this region. Anyone want to name this region? The Barman region. There you go. I'll stay with the creedal kind of thing, the Barman region. I'll forget all these regions by the time we move through them. All right, so we're going up first. Number 1, Exodus versus number 16, seed 16, Haggai. Look, I'm assuming Exodus has gone through here. Anyway, yep, great. And then next one up is Colossians versus Ephesians. Okay, that was another one where I did that on purpose.
That's tricky.
I get them mixed up. I get them mixed up all the time. But I think I have to give it to Ephesians, right? What's that? Sorry, Rosie?
Colossians is like your new clothes for God, yeah? Like you put on your new clothes and is it? And the armor. No, I don't know. I'm gonna stop talking.
I think you're right. I mean, there's a lot of overlap.
I had a friend who could only ever remember Galatians, Ephesians, Colossians, God's and Philippians by God's Electric Power Company. So we've currently got electric versus company. So what is it? Is it electricity or company?
We've been hanging out in Ephesians in the lectionary for those who follow recently, and like Ephesians 2 is very good. Like there's some real great stuff. God's household, dividing wall, hostility. A lot of good reminders to Christians that we're grafted on. A lot of good, like, you know, passages that you can use to push back against supersessionism. For me in my head, and again, I get confused again of what's in what. I always think of Ephesians more as the kind of, I guess, the earlier, little more authentic, and then Colossians a bit more as the like riffing on Ephesians. But like, I could be wrong on that. So like, don't at me. So what are we voting for? I'll vote for Ephesians. What are others voting for?
Yeah, Ephesians.
I think I'm going to go Colossians purely for set your minds on things above, not on earthly things. That was one of my favorites.
That's nice.
So go Colossians.
Yeah, I'll go Ephesians. Because, and it's not even a reason that's got to do with the book. It's got to do with the fact that I've preached more on Ephesians than Colossians. So I'm going to go with the book that I've done more on. Yeah.
Okay. Deuteronomy versus 2 Thessalonians. Deuteronomy versus 2 Thessalonians.
Is this an easy win to Deuteronomy? Is this another quick round?
I think so.
I think it is. Great. Moving through. Deuteronomy. Next one up, the Gospel of Matthew versus Zechariah. This might be another easy one.
Yeah, Matthew, right?
Yeah,
Matthew.
Zechariah.
I mean, we
Oh,
could just
sorry.
we could just bounce it out just to annoy Steff, just like, just if we really want, just create havoc, just have a conspiracy. Okay, so Job versus Nahum. Is anyone going to vote for Nahum?
Job.
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 Yeah.
Job.
Yeah, great. Good.
Sorry to
let me bring
whoever
in
wrote these
three-
others.
Let me bring in 3 friends to argue about it and tell us why it should be named.
Great. Number 6 seed Daniel versus the 11 seed 1 Peter.
I nearly swore on your podcast.
Oh, you can do that. This is after dark, baby.
Daniel,
Okay. Yep.
I'm not convinced.
I don't think that's a wild decision. Like, I think the Peter letters are okay, but it's Time for Judgment to Begin with the Household of God is a banger. That's that's a top tier track. But Daniel's a very rich story. What do others think?
My judgment is biased. Haven't read 1 Peter in a while, but Daniel is the first book in the Bible to mention the afterlife. And so for that, I think Daniel is an interesting book to keep in.
Yep.
Daniel's also it's got the depiction of the angels in it. Am I recalling that correctly? Yeah, that's just so cool. So
I mean, the fiery furnace, the lion's den, the beast coming out of the water. That's
right.
It's Lord of the Rings.
But then, in Peter, you have the kind of reinstatement of the, be holy because God is holy. And it's this kind of great new calling of so many key Old Testament principles, and that you're a chosen people, and that you're not a chosen people by your biology, but through Christ. And I think that's hugely important, that our place in God's family is not, connected to necessarily who your parents or what your family line is. So I know I kind of went for Daniel early on, but I feel like there's an evangelical in me that has to go for 1 Peter.
It's a beautiful eulogy. Beautiful.
Yeah, today we honor 1 Peter and lay him to rest.
Thank you, sir. That is brilliant. Alrighty. Hebrews versus Habakkuk or something else.
I'm interested to hear if anybody wants to speak to Habakkuk, because I don't know it very well.
So my speaking to Habakkuk would be early on, there's some real honest anger at God. There's how long will injustice go on? How long will the evil prosper? Are you not God? Are you not going to do something about it? And then God answers. And this is great back and forth of Habakkuk kind of, calling God out and God responding. That I like. The priesthood stuff in Hebrews, that was pretty good. What do other people think?
Yeah, my vote's actually going for Habakkuk. I really enjoy the way that the prophet sort of opens up with that lament and that sort of querying God, and it feels like this backwards and forwards, and it feels real. It just feels real. And although the book of Hebrews has got some great stuff in it, I actually personally, Habakkuk appeals to me more in my wrestle with my faith. So I go with Habakkuk.
Yeah, it's a tricky one for me. As an Old Testament person, you would think that I'd pretty much go for the Old Testament book, but I actually quite like Hebrews. And what Amanda was saying, it's actually, I don't know if Liam did this on purpose, pitting these 2 books of faith against each other. Because I think it was
because they started with H.
Oh, okay. But yeah, but the theme of faith comes about in Hebrews as well. Having faith in what we cannot see. That's that certainly resonates with the doubt that Habakkuk, shows. So, yeah, I don't know with this one. I'll wait.
Hebrews comes through so strongly. Both you get great cloud of witnesses. That's key, and you get the like Jesus had to experience all that we experience, suffer alongside his brother and sister, so that Jesus could intercede as our great high priest, as one who knows what it is to be human, right? Like that. I think that is like, if anyone like listens to 22 of my sermons, that idea is pretty prevalent in 17 of those. Like that's pretty core to me. So I think I'm going to go Hebrews.
There's some great like theology in Hebrews, interpreting Jesus and the meaning of Jesus. Hebrews 9 talks about, the better form of, sacrifice. And I love the engaging with, Jesus kind of just goes in and blows it up and ends that. So things like that I like Hebrews for. So, and I'm not familiar with Habakkuk. I haven't read it in a while, so I'll vote for Hebrews.
Yeah, I think I admitted in the opening that Habakkuk was what I'd not read. So maybe I need to keep it so that I can read it. But I'm obviously voting for Hebrews. I think that the way that Hebrews talks about God's rest and applies that theological idea, the way Hebrews encourages us to gather together and to meet together, I think is really important. We often think that we do life on our own, whether that's as Christian people or just in the West in general. And I think that's a really stupid idea. We're relational, we live in community, we need support, we need networks. And we make all of our decisions in connection and in relation with other people. We do theology in a community, we read the Bible in a community. And I think that Hebrews is a really important reminder and encouragement of that.
All right, Hebrews it is. And then the final of this region is, hit the wrong button. I opened up PowerPoint instead of Excel. So that's great. Now I've just got a picture of Sharon Hollis looking at me because that was the episode that went out yesterday. But this time it is Isaiah versus 2 John. It's going to be Isaiah, right? Okay, that's strike 1, strike 2, strike 3. All 3 letters of John are out of here. Did not progress through. Sorry, buddy.
Sorry to this man.
See, that's the comedy you get from the guy who runs the internet culture and Christianity.
And I think that'll cover the disappointment of having the other 2 major prophets being cast out in the first round. So we need a major prophet there.
We kept Isaiah.
There we go. Go Isaiah.
We kept the most like commonly Christian
and the longest
of the major prophets. So that's nice to know. All right, we're into the final region, which will be the Belha region. And so here we go. We have this 1 seed Romans versus the 16 seed Malachi. Now I know there's gonna be someone who's gonna like come at Romans for the 1 seed. But anyone want to vote for Malachi? Yeah, okay. Yeah. Rosie Claire, what you got?
Look, I mean, only because when you initially asked us to do this, you're like, what's your favorite book of the Bible? And Malachi was second on that list for me, so I have to vote for it.
Nice.
Obviously, I am a good Protestant evangelical person, and I know that Romans is the book that you need to have the entire Bible in one book. So I can support Romans going through. Steph's making faces at me. I suppose for similar reasons to why would I Malachi, I spent time reading Malachi in my early 20s. I reread it this afternoon. And I think that Malachi, to me, I love the challenge that goes out to the leaders of God's people. And it just says your religion is rotten. and I hate rotten religion. And that message never gets old, and still needs to be heard. And I think that the fact that God in his word challenges religious leaders to be authentic in their faith, to appropriately and adequately lead people in a true and living religion, that's important, and I don't want to lose that message.
That's great. And that can be a touching eulogy, unless someone else wants to try to come in and really get a Malachi train, going.
No, I was just going to say amen, but I'm still voting for Romans. I'm so sorry.
I mean, I'm happy to just throw a vote in for Malachi because it undermines the evangelical institution, Yeah. That's what I'm about.
I feel like if we bounced God is love, we can't bounce nothing can separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus our Lord. Like, I think we have to.
Yeah,
You
sorry.
say that.
Sorry, Rosie, that carried me through. Yeah,
that was beautiful.
Yeah,
that was.
I'm gonna require you to flip another coin. I'm gonna join, Rosie and Steff here and vote for Malachi, because I think I find the book of Romans hypocritical. I mean, why would you write a book about a place you're never going to go to?
No,
so I just think, what? It's Malachi for the win.
100%. It's Malachi for me. It's Malachi for me, man.
Oh no, Romans is bounced. The upset.
I did not see that coming.
Of the tournament, the 1 seed Romans, that like every reform in the church's history, like we got to go back to Romans, Luther, but it's and all of a sudden we're just done.
I totally agree with you, Leo. But, I've been to a couple of funerals in the last few months, and I've just been hearing Romans. So every time I hear Romans, I associate it with death. So I'm going to put my vote for Malachi, but,
We've still got 1, 2, and 3 John, right? So, oh, wait, no, we don't.
Oh, dear. Well, now I have to do a eulogy for Romans. Pauline studies is like a bad dude place, right? Like, it's bad, and Romans is employed for a lot of bad. But if you just pick up like 5 through 8, like, is some of the best shit in the Bible. Like, it's Paul, just like he barely breathes. It's just this, the Christ, where we were all in Christ, we were all in Adam, we're now all in Christ. You want universalism? Romans is your best place to go to. Like, it's wonderful. Plus you get all the grafted onto Israel stuff in 9 through 11. Romans is wonderful, but I actually love this because what an upset. I mean, like, we needed something like that. I should have had this. If we had started this, people would have been like jolted into their seats, but like, we're an hour or so in, so it was a good jolt that like still surprises can happen. So Malachi knocks out Romans to move into the next round. Nothing is safe. All right. This might be a come down now. So
I think our ordinations are now on the line, I think.
Yeah.
It's fine. I'm a sociologist. I can
Lucky.
What would Auntie say? Good thing.
I'm not supposed to have opinions. So,
yeah.
I don't know why I'm here.
All right. 8 seed Philippians versus 9 seed Joel. Philippians versus Joel. I don't remember anything from Joel. What do others have?
I remember, the last bit of, your young men will dream dreams, and that bit.
We got that in Acts already, though, so like we don't need
That's
it here.
true. That's true. Yeah, I probably remember it because it is quoted in the New Testament as well. But that's my brother's called Joel.
Actually, that's a pretty good argument.
I think I think one of the biggest themes in the book of Joel is the day of the Lord. The day of Yahweh, and the imagery of the locusts, explaining the day of Yahweh. So it's a book that's really powerful as well with its message, but hard to go past Philippians. Philippians 4 verse 13 is a common verse that gets used by rugby players. They write it on their jersey or on their tapes. So I have a really good connection with that verse, so I'll go for Philippians.
I think I love the description of the Spirit just being poured out in Joel, and there's no more barriers So you don't have to be a prophet, you don't have to be a priest, you don't have to be anything. The Spirit is poured out to everyone. For someone who is queer, that was a very significant prophet for me. So for that reason, I will vote Joel.
I'm changing my vote now after what Steff said.
Yeah, Steff convinced me. I'll go Joel. Amanda's saying Joel.
I'm gonna vote Philippians, but I'm like, if we've already, if there's 3 to Joel and it's not gonna matter, like, I don't mind not having Philippians.
So we got, and now Rowan's brothers are represented, so that's nice. So
I was gonna say though that if we're worried about Day of the Lord imagery, we did just keep Malachi over Romans. So I don't know.
Joel and Malachi can battle it out in a day.
I don't think I was that much worried about it. I was just, I think people were saying that, they don't quite know what Joel's about. So that was the big thing for me and Joel. But yeah, no, it's not really anything to, I mean, the locusts, maybe.
All right, so Joel goes through. We then go down to 1 Thessalonians versus Ezra. We put a lot of weight on this Ezra matchup, but I'm now worried that it's got an uphill battle.
I feel like we need to keep Ezra in because we threw Nehemiah out. Yeah, so we got to vote in Ezra.
I feel good about that.
Okay. A nice word for 1 Thessalonians. You really get the, like, Paul thinks it's all going to end real soon, but it's out. All right, 1 Corinthians versus 1 Kings. I mean, I'm writing in Corinthians, but someone can yell at me if they don't want that to happen.
I mean, it pricks me because another overly used evangelical text, which is the only epistle which is ever used every year to say, people who are squandering and licentious and you're all sexually immoral and get in line. So kind of feel like I want to vote against it just because of its misuse.
That's fair enough, but I do love how mad Paul is in the Corinthians letters. He's just beside himself.
I'd keep Corinthians for the one body imagery. I think that there's, well, like I said before, we're not individuals. We are in community, and when one part of our community hurts, all of our community hurts. I'd love to see us take Corinthians to that kind of space more often. So I'll, despite the fact that parts of Corinthians are used as a tool for exclusion, I'd like to keep Corinthians 12 as a tool for inclusion.
Yeah, actually, you're right. I think about that image a lot, and particularly in relation to the Uniting Church, where I have been raised and still reside. That image of lots of different kinds of people coming together to form, the body or our body, is very powerful. And even when parts of that body have mistreated me in the past, I think we are still part of the one body, and so part of the same family kind of thing. So yeah.
And we can still have lots of arguments about gender and sexuality with just Corinthians. So that's a lot of talk right there on one book. Let's keep it.
I think also to say we've knocked out God is love. We've knocked out nothing can separate us from the love of God. We really got to also knock out the greatest of these is love. In round 1, we got to keep, sooner or later we have to vote for love. And I think maybe finally it's time. So, all right, great. Corinthians has gone through, but well put, everyone. All right, number 4 seed Revelation versus number 13 seed Joshua. Conquest narratives versus the conquest narrative. Which, I mean, yeah. I'm going to vote for Revelation here. I think there's just a lot more to redeem, even within some of the rough. I mean, because in the end, Revelation has there's so much beautiful. Every tear will be wiped from your eyes. So much of that, God will be the light. So much of that imagery toward the end of the peaceful kingdom. I know it takes a detour, but I think there's been a lot of great scholarship done to show, this is written from the underside of history. This is written from a fledgling movement that might not last out the century. Like, that informs a lot of that. And I think some of that imagery that comes through at the end is so beautiful. I know you can make similar cases that maybe the conquest narratives of Joshua are a similar kind of wish fulfillment thing from a colonized people, but I'm going to go Revelation, and I'll open it up to what others think.
I mean, I am co-pastoring a church which is named after the new city in Revelation. Again, those beautiful pictures of a city with no walls, no gates, you come in and out, where there's no more pain or suffering. Those are beautiful images. Joshua is also a really important book for talking about colonialism and post-colonialism, and the differing narratives that we find in Joshua of wiping out and destroying a nation versus peacefully settling with them, and some of the ways that the Old Testament potentially has been edited with an agenda to look like Israel was a kingdom like those other kingdoms and nations around them, but did they really peacefully settle? And what does that say about the human text and humanity and human motives in the book? So there's really rich stuff there for me. So this is difficult.
Yeah, I agree with Steff, with those themes of colonialism and a post-colonial way of reading Joshua. But there's also plenty of that in Revelation, particularly when we're speaking to empire and the sort of conversations around empire and colonialism and imperialism. So there's certainly a lot of that in Revelation too. And I'm going to do it again. I'm going to go against my Old Testament buddies and go for Revelation this time. So, because I like Revelation because it's one of the only books, if not the only book, that's written by an islander. Revelation's got my vote.
Right.
I'm going to vote for Revelation. Do we still need arguments? I think Joshua is great for, be strong and courageous, do not be terrified, because I, the Lord your God, am with you. Like, it's a great, there's so many good Sunday school songs to that. And as someone who spent many, many years leading the infant section on a beach mission team, I love a Bible verse that has a song. But I'm going to go for Revelation. And so many reasons. I think particularly, though, two striking reasons for Revelation for me. One is the importance of the fact that everybody in the church is a bride. I think we spend a lot of time talking about how everyone in the church is a son of Abraham and a son of God, and we need to counterbalance that by talking about how everyone is also a bride. I think that's really important. And the fact that Revelation tells us that there are people from every tribe, tongue, and nation. So you don't have to be either a particular gender or a particular ethnicity to be part of God's new creation. And that's a really important message.
Awesome. I'm seeing Revelations going through with some nice words said for Joshua. I think one of the things I'm very excited about is that this has really proven to be what I hoped it would be, both very fun and real great, reasons to pick up a book of the Bible that maybe you haven't read for some time, which I hope people are doing, or everyone tuned out a long time ago because they were yelling at us because we were getting not picking their favorites. So we might have made everyone very angry or excited to read their Bibles. All right, pushing through, we've got a couple more matchups in this round. 2 Corinthians versus 1 Timothy. I'm going to go once for 1 Timothy, 2 for 1 Timothy, 3 for 1 Timothy. No one's taking it. I want to give a shout out to it. It's got a great line of to take hold of the life that truly is life. Great line. But no, it's good. Okay, 2 Corinthians goes through. Amos versus Judges. Is anyone going to make an argument for Judges? I mean, Deborah and JL.
I do like how narrative Judges is. And I once did a Bible study at university, so quite a long time ago now, which was run by I think a Sydney Anglican. I was in Darwin at the time, but I think it was a Sydney Anglican, like, kind of person who had been sent there. And he tried to make this argument about that Israel only had a female judge whenever things were going really, really wrong and all the men weren't available. But the problem was the class was made up of me, who was in the Uniting Church, and then a bunch of Pentecostals, and we just weren't having that at all.
Yeah, that gives me life. I mean, Judges gives us... Oh, sorry, Steph, you go.
I was going to say, I don't know if am I preaching the eulogy of Judges here?
I don't know. I think Judges has a chance more than
Judges beat Amos.
Yeah. Judges is in for a chance, so you can make your case.
Yeah, it's we get this circular cycle of downward spiral. There is at the beginning a contrasting story of the tribes of Israel all reconciled and doing well as a woman on a donkey who advocates for her rights. At the end of the story, it's Israel is dismantled and they're fighting each other, and then this horrible story of a woman on a donkey whose rights and voice is silent, and the association of this lawless state and the treatment of women being something which is a story that's told in Judges, I think is a real exposure of God's heart and God's law, which I think is a real argument to keep Judges in the mix.
I'm also voting for Judges on the kind of bad use of the Bible. When I used to lead my beach mission team, we used to use Judges for why men couldn't go into the girls' sleeping tents, which, if you don't know, is the story of Jael putting a tent peg anyway, we'll leave it there. There is murder. Not that I advocate for that sort of thing, but on a serious note, with what Steph was saying, I think that Judges 19, the fact that the story of Judges 19 and the Levite and the concubine is in our Bibles, and we just don't even kind of talk about that, when we have texts in Genesis where like famously there is a threatened rape, and that has a whole discourse around it. It from the name Sodom, we have words that applied into the popular imagination, and there is no kind of similar outrage for this actual violent assault and murder of a woman in Judges, and that's something that I think as a church and as a culture we still need to reckon with. Why aren't we horrified by Judges 19? Why do this fact that the Levite gets to tell a story and tell his version of a story when the woman in question not only doesn't have a voice, she doesn't have a life, and that's for all the same reasons we kept Esther. I think it's why we need to keep Judges. That it's a huge, we can turn our noses up and say, oh, there was only women because there was a downward spiral or whatever. But I think that downward spiral is still reflected in society. So we need to look into that mirror and see what it's showing us.
Yeah, I'm gonna put my vote for Judges as well. I love the book of Amos. I loved how Amos comes about as some sort of an anti-hero. In chapter 7, he goes up, gets sent by God to go up to the north, and the Amaziah, I think it is, encounters him and says, "Where are you going?" And he said, "Well, just coming in to deliver a message. I'm not a prophet. I'm not a son of a prophet." It just has that real anti-hero feel. It's like he's a prophet, but he's telling him he's not one. He's just the son of a sycamore farmer or something like that, or he's a sycamore farmer. I love that about Amos. But with Judges, with all the reasons that Steph and Rosie brought about, I also give attention to chapter 11 and 12, where you've got the sacrifice of Jephthah's daughter. And that's a real problematic story. And, you know, gender issues come out of that, certainly come out of that, that particular story as well. Unresolved somewhat, and you know, as a result you get all these different readings of it, and I just think it's a story that's so rich in just all the different sort of problems that we encounter, and also the violence. I mean, some of the violence that occurs in there, it's stuff of, I mean, it's like watching what's that, what was it, Game of Thrones a bit, you know. It's just got everything in there. Probably perhaps not the bad season 8, but yeah, everything else seems to be in there in the book of Judges.
Amanda, how about you?
Yeah, I'm going Judges as well for everything that has already been said. I think it's a really important book to pay attention to and to learn from. So keeping it in there.
Great. Well, that was a wonderful discussion, and I think that was really helpful. And I think Judges is clearly going through. All right, one more matchup in the whole first round. So we got 2 kings versus Luke. It's Luke. We all happy? All right. It is Luke, and that concludes the first round, the round of 62. We're going to take a break. Back soon. And we're back. So we're going to continue on. We're going into the next round, and we decided off mic in that break, this is going to be a lightning round. We don't even get to make the case. We're just saying real quick. I mean, unless someone really wants to eulogize something or yell, but we're just going to burn through the round of the Sweet 16, and then we'll start getting more dug in once we get to the Elite 8. So here we go. The Sweet 16 begins with Mark versus Ezekiel. I'm going to go Mark. Yep, Mark.
Everyone for Mark?
For Mark.
For Mark. Okay, great. Mark goes through. We're going Samuel versus John.
I'm going Samuel.
Samuel.
I would have gone John.
I would have gone John, but Samuel.
I'm going John too.
Okay, we're flipping the coin then. It's Samuel. Well, the head is the royal, so there has to be Samuel, and the tail, the platypus is John. So the tail, the platypus is John. So John goes through the great political drama of Samuel, which I never even got to make my big case for. Stay tuned for a future Love, Rinse, Repeat episode where I rail against this injustice. Axe versus Jonah.
Bathsheba, right? You know, take a moment to you know, honor the woman whose story has been badly told for so many centuries. Before we move on, I'll leave it there.
No, I appreciate that. I just did one of my favorite sermons that I get to do, which is on Rizpah, great story in Samuel. So, you know, pour one out. Axe versus Jonah.
Jonah. I know everyone's going to go Axe, but I'm going to go Jonah.
I'll go Jonah.
Jonah.
I don't know.
Jonah.
I'm going to go Axe.
I'm going to go
Axe.
All right. Axe, and we're flipping again. The tails is Axe. The heads this time. Jonah goes through.
Jonah.
I mean, Axe only has like 3 stories and it repeats them a fair bit. So Esther versus Genesis. I'm going to go Genesis.
Genesis.
We made like we had a really good conversation about Esther.
I heard Rosie.
We about Genesis though. We just assumed we were keeping it.
Rosie, did I just hear you say Genesis?
You didn't, but I'm happy to take credit for Genesis.
Well, we can have a good conversation about Genesis in a future round. All right.
Sure.
Psalms versus Numbers.
Psalms.
Yeah, Psalms is great. I'm just happy Numbers got through one round. Proverbs versus Galatians. Oh, I'll go Galatians.
Proverbs for me.
Proverbs.
Galatians.
Oh, Steph, it's on to you.
Galatians.
Okay, 3-3. Heads is Galatians.
You just want to see him flip the coin, eh?
This is a great podcast. Heads. I was about to say heads is Galatians, and so it is tails. So it is the other one. Proverbs goes through.
Proverbs.
Interesting. Oh, Psalms versus Proverbs in the next round. Get excited, folks. Song of Songs versus Hosea. Song of Songs.
Song of Songs.
Songs.
Great. Ecclesiastes versus Ruth.
Ecclesiastes.
Ruth.
Wait.
Oh.
Okay. So it's now. So I think it's 2-2, and Steff and I haven't voted yet.
Oh.
What am I? Oh boy. Hey, Ruth has sexual innuendo. That's going for it. It's a narrative.
21st century author.
Ecclesiastes is
21st century author.
So, Amy Bird in her book I know we weren't meant to give defense.
No, we need it. I think for this one.
Bird in her book Recovering from Biblical Manhood and Womanhood uses this phrase gynocentric interruptions for all the times that we get women's voices and women's stories in the Bible against the kind of both against the fact that it is a predominantly masculine text, but it is also accused of being a predominantly masculine text. And I think it's a great phrase to remember that those interruptions are there and to think about why are they there and why do we think they're interruptions.
Oh, how appropriate is Ecclesiastes in this time of COVID? Appropriate. Everything is vanity, eh?
I'll vote for Ruth.
I'm going to go for Ruth as well.
Ruth goes through. Oh, yeah, Ecclesiastes.
Fair enough.
Oh, my heart just broke.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Ryan.
I hope you got a sound that sound that the heart broken that you can insert later on.
I'll play that in. Exodus versus Ephesians.
Exodus.
This
is so hard, but I don't know.
The paradigmatic story that the whole rest of the Bible keeps reinterpreting salvation through.
Right. That's it.
All right, I think
Crossing the Red Sea as well.
Sure. Exodus.
Deuteronomy versus Matthew. Oh. I mean, Matthew is just like Deuteronomy revisited.
And
right?
Deuteronomy is similar to what Steff was saying. It's one of those texts that gets reinterpreted throughout the rest of the Hebrew Bible and the Old Testament, the New Testament.
I'll go with Matthew because my favorite verse is in Matthew.
But I'm going to go Matthew as well because of the women in the genealogy.
What's your favorite verse, Rowan?
It is Matthew 13 verses 31 and 32, the parable of the mustard seed.
Okay.
Well, I am definitely going Matthew. I was just waiting to see if I needed to make a case.
Yeah, I'm going to go. I'm going with Matthew because Deuteronomy exists in every other book anyway. So.
And I mean, what I would go with Matthew too. Part of what I love about Deuteronomy is, how the call to Sabbath rest, but also, the love your Lord your God. And both those things occur in Matthew. And Matthew is great for all the reasons Steff spoke about in terms of eunuchs and the kingdom, as Rowan was saying with mustard seed.
Amanda, did you?
Oh man, I feel so sad because my vote's for Deuteronomy. I as great as the Gospel of Matthew is, I don't. It's not my favorite in terms of the way it speaks about Gentiles. But that's my eulogy for Deuteronomy.
My eulogy for Deuteronomy is the whole how far, this thing that you need is not far from you, not up in heaven that we have to go up there, not across a river, but here, so close to you. But anyway, Matthew's going through, which is all good too, because now we got sheep and goats still in the play. Job versus Daniel. I'm going to vote Job.
Job.
Great.
Daniel.
Oh.
Job for me.
Job goes through. Oh, sorry.
Doesn't matter what I vote anyway.
It doesn't go through with consensus, but it goes through. And Hebrews versus Isaiah. I'm going to go Isaiah.
Isaiah.
Okay, correct. Go and the Excel screen got away from me. Here we go. Malachi versus Joel.
Malachi.
I would go Malachi. The case made for it earlier was great.
I agree.
Yep. All right. Malachi's through. Ezra versus 1 Corinthians.
1 Corinthians.
I'm going 1 Corinthians.
1 Corinthians.
Okay. That gets through.
I don't know. No, I know.
Well, you already outvoted. You can make a dissenting. Whatever they do in the Supreme Court, right? A dissenting
A
opinion.
dissenting opinion.
Revelation verse 2 Corinthians.
Revelation.
Revelation.
And Judges verse Luke.
Luke.
I'm going to say Judges.
So Luke is my favorite book of the Bible.
I only put my vote to Judges. Just the problematic chapter 11 and 12, I reckon, for me, Jephthah's daughter. It's a really conflicting story, and I think conflict is essential in the final rounds.
Have we sent any Gospels through yet?
Didn't we just send Matthew? We sent Matthew.
And Mark.
Sent Matthew through.
And Mark got through.
And John as well.
I think all the Gospels are still in play.
All the Gospels.
My advocacy for Luke is you get the Magnificat and you get the declaration of I have come. What have I come to do? Set the captives free. I mean, where are you going to get that Jesus elsewhere? Of Mary saying I'm going to send the rich away empty, and Jesus saying I'm setting the captives free. You get abolition, you get socialism, and you're like 4 chapters in.
And I would add to that, and this is why Luke is my favorite book, is Luke 8 and the story of the bleeding woman, which is amazing, and it forms like an entire chapter in my PhD because of how it was spoken about. So I can't disregard it. I think that story. So I heard a sermon. I'm just shout out to Erica Jimenez at Barney's Broadway, who preached on this so beautifully as an encounter of a woman who does not have power in her society, her encounter with a powerful man. And we're so used to that story of a powerless woman meeting a powerful man and it going wrong. And here it doesn't. And that is such an important portrayal of who Jesus is and who a God is. That I think is the core of Luke for me, but also it's Luke 15 and the parable of all the lost stuff. They're my that's why Luke is my actual favorite book, I think, if I had to pick. And I didn't get to say that in the last round. So I've broken the rules, but that's why I'm voting for Luke.
It was good. It was good to break it for Luke.
That's a beautiful eulogy for Luke. That's a fantastic eulogy for Luke.
So I think it's close-ish. Amanda, what are you voting for?
Yeah, as much as I think the book of Judges is really important, my vote goes for Luke for all of those reasons. And, it's considered to be the gospel for all. So I like it. I'm going Luke.
So where are we at? Luke, who Amanda and Rose Claire, and then Judges is Brian and Rowan. So, Steff.
Yeah, I'm torn between the spotlighting of bad behavior and honest, violent stories being in our Bible to critique and engage with, and violence against women, particularly being a very real, tale for our times. And then the other side is everything that's been advocated for Luke, which I love as well. The Magnificat, the declaring of the captives being set free. Do you pick the good side or the bad side? The spotlighting of bad or the proclamation of good?
We can let the coin decide if you're not ready to.
I think I'm going to let the coin decide because I think I can't let Judges go.
Okay. So it's funny, there's a few times now it's been the top row versus the bottom row on my screen. So here we go. Who wants to someone else can say which is going to be which. I shouldn't have done that. Now it's bad radio. All right. Heads is Judges.
Limbs cut out.
Uh-oh. Am I still here?
You are now. I just
Oh,
didn't
no.
see the coin flip.
That's all right.
We have no idea what just happened.
I didn't do the coin flip. I was okay. Anyway, heads is Judges, tails is Luke. Tails is Luke. But I think we made really good discussions for Judges. So, all right. Oh, so there we go. We burnt through that round. So now we can, if we want to, we don't have to. In the Elite Eight, we can take a little more time, should we wish to, but we can also burn through stuff. But we've got our first gospel v gospel. We've got Mark versus John. And I like this because you couldn't think of them as two more different gospels. Mark v. John.
John?
I
would go John. Oh, sorry. I mean, Mark.
I'm going John because I think the story of Nicodemus is a story that everyone needs to hear, and you don't find that in the other gospels.
You have such a tender Jesus in John that I attach myself to quite a lot. Plus, I love the prologue. Like, I know the trendy choice. I feel like the trendy choice is Mark, but I'm gonna say John.
John's a unique player, right? You know,
That's true.
We've still got other synoptic gospels, but I'm going to go with John. I love the image of Jesus, of a resurrected Jesus making breakfast for his friends. I want a savior who makes breakfast on the beach.
Even if it is fish and bread.
You know what? Irrelevant to this conversation, I have celiac disease. When I fly long haul, the amount of times I've been given fish for every single meal, yes, even if it is fish and bread. And I'll enjoy the bread with gluten in it.
All right, you've convinced me. I'll switch to John.
Yeah, I'm going to go John. It's the only one with the Samaritan woman, isn't it?
We have the Canaanite woman and others, so I think yes. I think it's the yes. I think you're right.
Anyways, there's a few unique John stories that keep it in there. Sorry, Amanda, I talked over you. What
No,
say?
You're right. I was just gonna be like, no, because Mark has the Syrophoenician woman who's like my favorite story in the whole of the Gospels. It's not in John, talking about giving the scraps to the dogs, and there's this huge justice story, a story of the patriarchy and what that means. I'm feeling like I'm losing with Mark, but I just need to say Syrophoenician woman, I'm sad.
That can serve as a wonderful eulogy for the Gospel of Mark, because I think John has it. So thank you, Amanda, for those kind words. I'm surprised John got through. I'm excited. That'll be interesting for going forward. So John goes through. Next up, we have Jonah versus Genesis. I mean, Genesis is too rich, I think, to lose to Jonah. I think there's just too much in there. I mean, we get all the, if you want to have good conversations about gender, there's sexual assault and rape and misuse. There's sibling conflict. There's the create. I mean, there's just too much. You have the whole Joseph story. You have like a million stories, then you're just like, let's settle in for 15 chapters and just tell one story with all its.
Yeah, but you don't get a whale and a worm in Genesis.
You do in the creation.
You get the serpent in the creation.
If there was a whale in the flood narrative, I think some of those people would have been saved. Yeah.
And maybe there were worms on the ark. I don't know.
I don't think so. I think
I love Jonah, but I'm happy to go to Genesis.
Genesis.
All right, great. Oh, Genesis versus John coming up soon. The two creation accounts. So that'll be a lot of fun. Exodus versus Matthew. Oh, this is great because Matthew was just doing Jesus is the new Moses, Exodus typology throughout.
I just want to hear Steff.
Yeah, Steff. You can make the case, and then we'll see what we all do.
Yeah, I mean, I love Matthew because it's the strongest to define the basileia of God and this alternative empire against the empire of Rome. which has a flipping of the script and an alternative social hierarchy where the little ones are valued. And, I know we get that in some of the other Gospels, but it's just so rich in that regard. And also the text that I'm writing my thesis on doesn't appear in any of the other Gospels, where they talk about eunuchs, becoming eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven, and drawing from the beautiful passage in Isaiah and the place of eunuchs, and just the way that they embody gender expansiveness and gender diversity in the kingdom of heaven. It's just beautifully inclusive. So there's a little taster. I don't know if that's convinced you.
I'll make the Exodus case then, and then people can. I mean, that was great, Steff, and that was rich, and I'm in a tough place. But I mean, Exodus, you have the name of God revealed to Moses, the I am who I am, the I will be what I will be, that God will be revealed in what God is about to do, and that is set people free and make of them a people of God, to be a witness to the nations. You have God appear in this burning bush that it alights in flame but is not consumed, that God is somehow compatible with creation. God can show up and we are not obliterated but are set free. And then you have the foils of people. You have the song of Miriam. You have, just that whole thing of how we get out of a bad situation and then we immediately complain that now is not, all our problems haven't just disappeared. Plus, if we didn't have the book of Exodus, I do not believe we would have Paul Thomas Anderson's Magnolia. And that is a film I'm not ready to let go of. So anyway, that's my case for Exodus, which is not as good as Steff's case, but people can make of that whatever they want.
I gotta say, Steff, you are reframing Matthew for me, which is great, but my throat still has to go to Exodus. And for me, it's because you have this, one of the first stories of this scarcity and fear coming in with Pharaoh, and the ways in which God liberates people from that scarcity. And it's a story that we often forget, and it's one that we live by in our cause, this sort of feast and famine that goes on, and what God has to say in the midst of all of that. So it's really important for me to reflect on within our society around, who are the pharaohs and what are the ways in which we cling to that sense of scarcity and that fear that Pharaoh generates, and how are we meant to respond as a people of God, and everything that Liam said also.
Yeah, I'm going to make a case also for Exodus, and I'm sort of being an ally also to feminist reading. I mean, in the book of Exodus, you've got that really wonderful story of the Hebrew midwives, and it's sort of there's a scene from one of the Monty Python movies that I remember, where there's this mother in the kitchen, and she's just giving birth to children at will while she's washing the dishes. That image comes about when you hear the women arguing against Pharaoh. Like, Pharaoh's saying, oh, well, how are all these, Hebrew boys being born? And, well, they're very powerful. They're just, they're powerful women, the Hebrew women, they just give birth and then off they go. So that image from Monty Python sort of comes into my head. But, jokes aside, the resilience of women in the story as well. And it's not just the Hebrew midwives. I mean, you've got other, the Pharaoh's daughter who goes against Pharaoh's will to pick up this baby from the Nile. And then you've got women that are saving men. You've got Miriam, you've got Moses' mother, and then you've got Moses' wife, the Midianite woman. So all these wonderful women who, fear to reframe Exodus in a feminist sort of, or a pro-woman way. You can reread Exodus from that point of view. So yeah, that's my making a case for Exodus.
Oof. Rosie Claire, are we over to you?
Like I feel like I have to side with Steff. And not just because Steff is my friend. No, Steff is my friend. So maybe that means I can't vote. I don't know. I've been like flicking through Matthew while this conversation has been going on. I'm just really torn because I agree with everything that's been said about Exodus, but then I was like, well, but in the last round I was kind of like, do we need Exodus? I'm gonna go with Matthew. I'm gonna go with Matthew because of the stuff on eunuchs. I'm gonna go with Matthew because of when Jesus is like, Hebrews don't even get what marriage is. His confrontation with Pilate, which, if we're thinking about, Amanda was talking about the exchange with Moses and Pharaoh. I think, in Walter Brueggemann's essays on truth and power, we see that there's a real parallel exchange between Moses and Pharaoh and Jesus and Pilate, and that whole picture of authority and truth and power. Brian wanted to keep Ecclesiastes for its postmodernism, but then we've got like Jesus being like, what is truth? So
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. Pilate said that, but who cares, right? No, I'm gonna go with Matthew.
Rowan, what did you go for before?
I went with Matthew.
Okay, so we're 3-3. We're 3-3. All right. Pharaoh's is I don't know. Heads is Exodus. Tails is Matthew. Tails is Matthew. Matthew goes through.
He always freezes on the coin toss.
Oh. Did everyone hit Matthew went through? Did everyone that got heard? Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right. Wow. Matthew goes through. Oh, baby. All right. Job versus Isaiah. Isaiah. We've got an early vote for Isaiah.
I'm going Job.
Yeah, I'm going Job.
The story of Job, the way that it talks about grief, the way that it talks about relationship, the way that it talks about, that question of like, why do good things happen why do bad things happen to good people? And the story is going, but God is in the people and in the relationships. And, it's just, it's such a beautiful story. And it's something that speaks to the human range of emotions. So that's my vote for Job.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Amanda here as well. I mean, two of my other wisdom friends have gone out now, so I'm trying to fight valiantly here for Job. But the thing with Job, and Amanda was saying is, and this is one of the books where the Deuteronomy's theology comes into play. The whole blessing and curses. If you do good, you'll get blessed. If you do bad, then you'll get cursed. And Job, just as any other 21st century person would actually questions that notion, that understanding, because in reality, we don't see that happening a lot. We see good people suffering, and we see bad people, doing well. And it's a real life question that sort of transcends time. And also, the thing I like about Job is that just the characterization of Job. Where here you have a man that's had a lot in his life. He's got all these wonderful things, but you sort of wonder why he persisted to go through this journey of learning. And to me, that's sort of the essence of it all. The satisfaction and sort of the clarity that it gets towards the end comes out of this sort of understanding that this is what he's been missing is these lessons. He's had all the wealth in the world, but he hasn't had the knowledge and the wisdom. And to me, that's something that we could all learn from. And yet he, at the end, it's sort of like, well, he doesn't really achieve it, but he's still got a lot of questions. And I think that reflects reality a lot. So yeah, I'm going to go with Job.
Steff?
To advocate for Isaiah, there is this picture of the equitable city, or the just city that I love, an equitable economy and society that I love in Isaiah, the visions of all nations coming to the holy mountain of God to worship together. It's a very abundant vision. Again, another passage about eunuchs, where the eunuchs get a place greater than sons and daughters, which for anyone who is queer is a beautiful inclusion of people outside of the binary, or who don't fit in, who have previously been excluded from the temple and been excluded in a lot of the laws. So to see that in the Old Testament is beautiful. So there's a few wonderful things about Isaiah, which I'll be voting for Isaiah for.
I'm also voting for Isaiah. I'm voting for Isaiah because of the servant songs in Isaiah. And like I said, I love Bible verses that have songs to them. And, you know, there's a wonderful Colin Buchanan rendition of a very famous part of Isaiah. And that's really core to my faith. No, but genuinely because of the servant song imagery in Isaiah. And I think that without that, you know, we were saying how we needed Exodus because of how it foreshadows so much of what the gospel is about. And I think that the servant songs in Isaiah do that so beautifully as well.
Rowan, what are you thinking?
I had initially gone with Isaiah, but I think Brian's convinced me to go with Job. So yeah.
I think I want to go with Job too. Sorry to the great case made for Isaiah. I think one, you get this beautiful idea of this, the friends of Job do everything right up until the point they open their mouths. And I think there's a sense that we can all learn a lot from that like going and sitting with your friend as they grieve and staying through the days in the dust is a beautiful kind of pastoral thing to do. The issue you have is when you start talking sometimes and try to theologize your way out, you know, into their grief. And that's a decent lesson. Also, without Job, you don't have the Coen brothers, A Serious Man, and I don't want to lose that film. So, all right, great. Job goes through. To go against.
I was going to say, and talking of like opening your mouths, I think, you know, you guys get Job, we got Matthew, and now that I think about it, I'm like, I think I just like merged Matthew into other gospels, but I was like, Matthew's amazing. So I probably just should have shut up.
No. All right, we've got Malachi, which is somehow into the Elite Eight today. Just that was a great story. That's our Cinderella story in the end. It wasn't Samuel, it was Malachi getting into the Elite Eight. Can it continue its Cinderella run? Can it beat 1 Corinthians? Malachi versus 1 Corinthians. Look, I'll start us off. I'll be voting for 1 Corinthians, but no one has to pander to me. I think, like, okay, it can be problematically used, but this idea of the wisdom and the folly of God is very beautiful. The cross being so central, that, like, you know, that Paul was just so rigorously grabbing onto the cross that you couldn't just jump to resurrection, you couldn't just jump to glory. You had to go through the cross, you had to go through the suffering, through the, you know, Jesus' commitment to go all the way down into the pain and hurt of the world. And if you couldn't get onto that, you know, then you couldn't get onto what everything else was about. And the thing is, if you let go of Jesus on the cross, it is very easy to let go of the crucified people of this world. And I think that is a beautiful appeal. Plus, Paul is telling off rich folks who are eating before the day laborers get off work. And, you know, we need that now too. Pay people to stay home. So there you go. That's my vote for 1 Corinthians. And but I'm happy for the for Team Malachi to come in as well.
My vote's with 1 Corinthians, I would say.
Look, I love Malachi, but I feel like given, if this was a chess game and, we wiped out Romans with Malachi, maybe it's kind of fair to now wipe out Malachi with 1 Corinthians. Like, that hurts my heart, but 1 Corinthians is a good book. I'm standing by what I said before about the body imagery. Also shout out to the fact that it's, that marriage is a concession. It's better to be single. So we'd not have that if we didn't have 1 Corinthians. I'm trying to think of lots of contrary reasons to be okay with 1 Corinthians. I'm willing to let 1 Corinthians swoop down and take out Malachi.
Yeah, I'm a bit conflicted here because 1 Corinthians, obviously a very popular text, but I can't help but point out the importance of Malachi from a canonical point of view, because if you look at the Hebrew canon, Malachi isn't really towards the end, but in the Christian canon it is, and it's meant to be the door opener to the birth of Christ from a Christian canonical point of view. So Malachi plays an important view from a Christian perspective, because without Malachi, we don't have that door open, because Malachi, prophesies the coming Messiah, and then bang, Matthew comes in with the birth of the Messiah. But I think Rosie said before about Isaiah. So Isaiah sort of speaks to a Messiah. I mean, if we're talking Christian interpretation, then certainly we could sort of read that towards the Messiah. But if we're talking ancient Hebrew context, then I don't think Isaiah knew anything about Jesus, whereas Jesus was quoting Isaiah a lot. So I'm sort of conflicted in that view. So just for the sake of being an Old Testament scholar, I'm just going to go Malachi.
Really?
Got to stay true to my gang.
Thank you, Brian, for voting for my point that I was willing to throw under the bus. You made me kind of, regret being I'm happy to let Corinthians take it.
You can still have time to change your mind, Amanda.
Yeah, so I would have voted Malachi, but I think I'm about to be outvoted.
I mean, if
Amanda, if you vote Malachi, I'll also vote Malachi.
I'm voting Malachi.
Oh, now it goes down to Steph. Do you want to force it to sudden death, or what are you going to vote for?
I mean, if I speak in the tongues of mortals or angels, but do not have love, am I just a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal? Is that what I am right now?
So do you love Malachi?
I'm going to vote 1 Corinthians.
Yeah. If that was a great advocacy for watching the video, because we all fell off our chairs when Steph began there. All right, so
it was such a beautiful eulogy, though. It was fantastic, Steph. It was
because Paul stresses the body in 1 Corinthians, head will be Malachi and tails will be 1 Corinthians. Oh, there's a lot riding on this one.
I'm so torn.
Head. Malachi goes into the next round. Malachi has knocked out Romans and 1 Corinthians.
Malachi's going on my list of books I need to revisit.
Well,
let's see what it's going to go against. We've got Revelation versus Judges. Judges, which is also I guess a surprise book to be in the Elite Eight, to make it all the way there. So, but now Revelation versus Judges.
I can't go past Revelation. I'm sorry. It's just so I mean, it's cinematic, which is just lovely to read. But also, yeah, just the vision for what the kingdom looks like. It's this is kind of why I also go with Matthew, because it's just a lot of kingdom stuff, which is something that, you know, you really hold on to, or at least I do. It describes a future that I want to be part of.
Still love Judges for all the reasons we've put forward. I was willing to knock it out before. I'm going Revelation.
I'm going Revelation.
There's a lot of weird imagery in Revelation that is just uninterpretable. I do love it for its, you know, speaking against the empire. The same things that I love about Matthew is, you know, deliverance, beautiful themes. But I'm just going to stick with Judges because I've campaigned so hard for Judges previously that I feel like it's you know, it's too early to bow out now.
Amanda?
I think I think Revelation is one of those books that you need like to read every other book of the Bible in order to sort of try and understand Revelation. So it's got a lot that that resonates and that echoes the rest of the Bible. And I just think that, you know, we're sort of not far away from the Olympics, and Judges is a bit like the Australian Boomers. It's run its course. It's, you know, it's come against the great American team, and, you know, there's no Cinderella fairy tale story coming in, and so I think Revelation will take this one.
I think Revelation has it now. Amanda, do you want to say a word for or against?
I was going to vote for Judges, so I will just give a small eulogy that in terms of the stories that we should be continuing to reflect on and continuing to reclaim. I think the book of Judges has a lot of them, and there's lessons in the book of Judges that we still need to be learning.
Thank you, Amanda.
It makes a good case.
Are you changing or are you staying with? You're staying. Okay. Well, okay. Revelation goes through. So we're into the final four, folks. We're into getting real exciting now. We are having the Gospel of John versus the book of Genesis.
Did we do the top right corner with Psalms and Proverbs?
Oh, we did.
Song of Songs and Ruth?
Sorry.
Thank you, because I was going to say, where was Psalms?
Yeah, I missed a whole section of the Elite Eight. Thank you for that. So Psalms versus Proverbs. These actually, yeah, because these are good contests that we can't ignore. Psalms versus Proverbs. I'm going to go Psalms.
It's all in the same. Look, I'm going to go Psalms, which means I don't get to say my spiel for Proverbs. My spiel for Proverbs, though, was that. Well, my spiel against Proverbs was that I don't like the idea of wives being compared to nagging taps. But my spiel for Proverbs was, I think it's Proverbs 5, you know, the may you ever delight in the wife of your youth, and may, you know, her breast always be satisfying to you, I think is a really important Bible passage that we don't dwell on enough, but I'm going to go Psalms.
I think I'm going to go with the Psalms for the same reason a lot of people love Job, just the honest voicing of human experience to God. And yes, there's a lot of problematic violence and views in there that should be engaged as well, but just the fact that we can say anything, pray anything to God, love it.
Ron? Oh, Amanda. Sorry, Amanda.
I'm going Psalms for that reason as well.
Yeah, I'm Psalms as well.
Psalms has it. Then we have Song of Songs versus Ruth. Song of Songs is so.
I'm just going to I'm just going to repeat what. I'm going to repeat what Rabbi Akiva said about the Song of Song. It is the greatest book. the holiest of holies. I think Rabbi Akiva says about the Song of Song. It's the book that gets read in the Passover. And there's just so much stuff there, you know. There's a lot of very pro-woman imagery in there, celebration of the celebration of the human body. You know, and I wrote my master's thesis on Song of Songs, so you know, I was engaging with this book from a very conservative background. You know, with my church, we're very conservative, and so therefore we hardly read or touch this book. So I find it fascinating that we've gone at lengths to try and avoid this book when it plays such a prominent role in Jewish society. So I mean, it's just a wonderful book, you know, and that's without even trying to do an allegorical reading of it. You know, you just admire all the imagery in there, the metaphors and the comparison. I mean, comparing, you know, hair to a flock of goats. Hey, that's just, it makes you stop and think. You know, you don't get it straight away. And I think the author of Song of Songs did that deliberately. They don't want you to get it straight away. They want you to sit down, have a think about the imagery before you make an assumption. And I think that's a perfect sort of insight into trying to understand the love of God as well. So, you know, we did knock off God is love in the beginning, but I think God is love is right here in the Song of Songs. So Song of Songs got my vote.
So look, does anyone unless anyone wants to make a case for Ruth, I'm letting that could be our voice for Song of Songs in this round. All right, great. Great. Okay, now we are properly on. Thank you for that, Kat. Now we are properly on to the final, on the Elite Eight. We finished the Sweet 16. Now we're on to the Elite Eight. John versus Genesis.
I need to go Genesis.
Okay.
Is it controversial to say John?
Well, Amanda's already said Genesis. So it's at least open.
I'll say Genesis.
Okay, now it's really open. I will also say Genesis, I think.
Why?
Okay, good. Well, you didn't ask the others why. Why am I getting good?
Open question. They all jumped in.
I mean, I love John. John is my favorite gospel, so I feel conflicted. I just feel you can spend a lifetime in Genesis. I just think because of the nature of the difference we see often between Hebrew Bible and New Testament of a lot more ambiguity or openness, maybe a bit less didacticism, that like, I mean, that you just have from the jump. So here's two creation accounts. Then we're going to go Noah, and we're just going to put two accounts just together. Like, we're not even going to keep them separate. We're just going to boom right there. You have just these like just huge failures of human beings trying to figure out what it is to live together and failing. Of the first murder, you have these huge typologies of people emerge that can be mapped on to so much of human society and interaction going beyond. And then you come to Joseph, and I mentioned this before, like, you have this long story in which like God has been an active player, like just talking to Abraham, just like hanging out. And then all of a sudden God's like not really that present for this whole back end of Genesis. You have this story of Joseph and his brothers betraying him. And then one of the more like interesting examinations of like power dynamics in that you have a woman of power abusing her male slave. Like, I mean, we've talked a lot rightly about the subjugation of women, but you have this very like flipped examination of what power can be and mean in subjugation and different relationships. And then you have Joseph like does this whole weird thing with his brothers where he's like framing his youngest brother to see if any of the other brothers have learned a lesson and might actually stand up for each other. You've got like little stories of Reuben and Judah throughout, which show whether they want to learn or not, coming to this moment. You just have such rich people who, and also huge failure and violence and mess. And I just think you could, I mean, maybe it's because I just, I feel like you got the Jesus story, it's just there, and that's great, and I love it. But you could just spend so much time in Genesis that I don't want to let it go. So that's my argument for.
I'll take it.
And just with the gender politics as well, you know, the one of the other most dominant aspects of Genesis is the patriarchal narratives. But you know, when you read the works of someone like Barbara Deutschman, who does wonderful work on the birth narratives in Genesis, she certainly sees that, you know, the crucial role that women play in this in the great you know, blessing. You know, without the women in these narratives, you know, the blessing doesn't move forward. You know, and there's this big search for, you know, the heir to the, but you know, without you know, without Sarah, without Rachel, without Rebecca, you know, these promises don't come to fruition. And yeah, I mean, you know, just looking at how, you know, you see these counter narratives coming about in Genesis is magnificent. So yeah, I mean, like, I enjoy the book, the Gospel of John, but at the end of the day, John models his first few the first chapter on Genesis, so I'm going to go with Genesis.
There's a part of my evangelical heart that is like, you know, Jesus, let's keep Jesus at the center. How on earth can we choose Genesis over a gospel?
I'm also feeling that, but
That's great. I love that.
But I think the declaration of, you know, I am the light of the world, and you know, the flipping of you know, offering sacrifices, and you know, actually like the light being offered freely, and you know, I am in the Father and the Father is in me, and let's abide in love, and just the beauty. I don't know, it's hard to even go into all of the beauty that John's gospel gives us. And yeah, as you said, the alternative, you know, beginning origin myth, which I think is a big reason to keep Genesis, is like, where do we come from? Who is the God behind the universe? Yeah, and just the proclamation of eternal life. I don't know, it's hard to let John go, so it's tough, but I think I'm going to edge towards John.
All right. So I think we're at 2 verse 3 with Roland still to vote. Am I right?
No, I went with Genesis.
You went with Genesis?
Yeah, I did.
I
I feel bad about it, but I still did go with Genesis.
And Amanda, you went with Genesis, didn't you? Okay, so I am conflicted. Like, John is great. I think, you know, I'm going ahead. Like, that whole last discourse with his disciples is all like, look, you're gonna be scared, but I'm going ahead so that I can be with you, and that's Jesus.
And there's a
longest prayer in the Bible.
And as a Hebrew Bible scholar, like, you know, I don't tend to do this, but you know, John, it says that at the beginning was the Word, so you know, Jesus was in Genesis, so still holding.
Well, that's it. And Yahweh did go ahead of them in the garden to the outside world. So
there you go.
Okay, I like that. Matthew versus Job. I'll go for a gospel here. I'll go Matthew.
I'm going Job.
Matthew.
Got to be Matthew for me.
Yeah, I've got to stay true to my Job. Yeah, Job, but are we getting outnumbered, Amanda?
Job is problematic. You know, I think that the whole idea of like the devil coming up and being like, hey, God, can I, like, you know, have a go at this dude? Like, that's the Bible according to Rosie Claire.
It's Hasatan. It's not the devil. It's Hasatan. It's the adversary. So
okay,
the figure of Satan doesn't really exist in the book of Job, as you'd imagine in the New Testament.
All right, I will be schooled.
Right.
It's problematic. I find it problematic of God, well, whoever it is, putting that question to God. That to me really, it kind of hurts my heart, that there's this God that is like, you're all right, have you tried this guy? And also, as much as like I hear what you and Amanda are saying about like Job's suffering and his complaints, but the kind of the whole like, okay, well, you did a good job, so here's some new kids and new crops and a new crop. I'm just like, it's just not how suffering works. And I don't know what to do with Job. So that's why it can go now.
Yeah. I do think that last chapter of Job, the last little bit, the coda, which I know some people just excise as being a later addition, but like is troubling. And Matthew, you get sheep and goats, which I think is pretty, Matthew 25 is so vital. I think we're down to Steff. Steff, have you voted? What are you doing?
I'm voting Matthew.
Okay, Matthew
Definitely.
goes through. Great. Ooh, Matthew versus Genesis coming up. Then we're going up to Psalms versus Song of Songs. Wow, this is
Okay, so here's my plea for Song of Songs. All right. Aside from everything else that we've spoken about, the church for a very, very long time has done a really, really poor job at handling sexuality, right? And so much damage has been done over hundreds and hundreds of years because the church has decided what is pure, what is impure, how we're meant to act, and putting this sense of holiness above who we're actually created to be and how we're created to love. So that is why I think the Song of Songs is so, so important. And yay for the Psalms as well. I think they're great, but we really, really need to be reclaiming what sex and sexuality is. And Song of Songs is the book for me to help that.
Love it.
I'm with Amanda on this. I mean, it's hard because letting Psalms go feels really counterintuitive. I mean, I love that. Like that's the whole point of this game. Oh, we'll just get rid of that book of the Bible. That's fine. And I think when I think about Psalms, when I think about everyone I spoke to in the course of my PhD, so many people were like, when I was in a tough time, the only thing I could read was Psalms. So many people, like I say that like I interviewed hundreds of people. Of the people I interviewed, a significant amount of them alluded to Psalms, and I want to honor that. But for exactly what Amanda said, it has to be Song of Songs. I think about my friend and colleague Erin Sessions, who would tell us that Song of Songs gives us a model for how to talk about consent, and that we can use it in thinking through our national problem with intimate partner violence. That's so important that we do, as Amanda is saying, have this book that is like and as Brian told us before, you have bodies, they are glorious, and we have this woman in the text who may or may not be married to her partner and who is like, let him come and give me kisses. And, that is just glorious that is in our scriptural text.
Mm-hmm.
I love what Rosie said. I mean, and the whole consent bit, that is so true, because there's a lot of this type of language where it's requesting, let my lips kiss, it's not come here and I'll kiss you, it's none of that stuff. It's very very respectful. It's very consensuous, is it the word? So I love that about it, and I just really admire how it's I mean, you read the book, and a lot of people might not know this, but you read it, it's 8 chapters, right, or 8 songs, but it's been widely held by a number of scholars that it's actually an anthology of over 30 different poems that is being put together to form this one book. So and the way it's being structured, it almost seems like it's a narrative, and when you read it in the English language or Samoan language, in my case, it seems like a narrative because it's being translated across, but when you look at it in the Hebrew text, it's 30 plus odd different poems that have been put together, and one of my favorite verses, and we've spoken a lot about gender and all those other stuff, but verse in chapter 1, verse 5, that's sort of, you could almost read it as a rejection of racism. I am black and beautiful. And there's that conjunction that's been translated in a lot of English translations as and, but I prefer to translate, and this is what I argued in my thesis. I translate it as but. I am black but beautiful, because to me it's the woman speaking to sort of the oppression at the time, because there's an understanding that in ancient times, if you were fair skinned, you were associated with beauty, but if you had dark skin, you weren't so much. You were seen as a person who worked the field, which the woman in Song is. So in sort of subversive to that, she goes, "I'm black but beautiful." So that's why I've chosen "but," to sort of act as some sort of a counter towards those very anti-black tendencies in that society. So yeah, song for me.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this comes as a surprise to anyone, but I'm all for reclaiming conversations in the church about good sexuality. And yeah, for all of the reasons mentioned, Song of Songs for me.
Ron?
Look, I think I am going to be outvoted regardless, so I might just put in a vote for Psalms, just because I think, it's like there's so much good stuff there. But no, everything that everyone has said is that's so true, and actually I hadn't thought about a lot of that. So I'll vote for Song of Solomon.
Right, thank you. I think I am too. I want to go shout to Bruce Springsteen has a song, Jack of All Trades, which he sung after the 2008 financial collapse. And he talks about being a jack of all trades. This guy's just, I'll mow your lawn, I'll do this. And it ends with this great line of, if I had me a gun, I'd find the bastards and shoot them on sight, talking about the capitalists who ruined the country kind of thing. And I always think about that whenever I read Psalm 137, which is this, oppressed people dreaming of the revenge on their captors. And the fact that that's in the Psalms, I know it's it's problematic and tough, but the fact that you can just say people who have been ripped from their homes and violated and exploited dream of revenge violently upon their thing, and then give that to God is powerful. But I am very happy that Song of Songs goes through. So we're down to our last of this round, Malachi versus Revelation. The matchup everyone was expecting from the beginning.
Can Malachi do it?
Yeah. Can Malachi hold out?
I'm just laughing. I feel like it's my fault that Malachi is there, so I need to keep voting.
It is your fault, Rosie.
It's caught up in this river now. Almost, we all. So I assume Rosie is still voting for Malachi. What everyone else doing?
I'm still going Revelation. I love that book to death.
I will go Revelation. Steff?
I mean, I don't really know Malachi very well. The verse that I know the best out of Malachi is God hates divorce. So it's really not a good argument for Malachi in my books at this stage.
But then Matthew 19 hates divorce.
But he hates divorce because men are choosing to leave their wives, and he's saying you've forsaken your marriage vows. So it's a real condemnation of men who are just I'm out.
And Steph's book, Matthew 19, it's the same thing.
It's true. I could just simply from not knowing the book very well. Yep. But I mean, Rosie has sided with me purely on the basis of friendship before. So I'm it's hard at this point. I want the Cinderella story to happen. I'm going to vote for Malachi.
Against the name of their own church is a brutal move. Amanda or Brian, whoever wants to go in.
Brian, go for it.
Oh, yeah. Just in case my good friend Ewan Lowe listens to this, because I know he did his PhD on Revelation, I'm going to cast my vote for Revelation. But I'm looking for that Cinderella story for Revelation.
Amanda, what are you doing?
I think I'm going to go Revelation.
Revelation gets through. We don't need a coin. I don't want to mess with coins in the book of Revelation. That feels too scary to me. All right, we're into the final four. Just two matchups, the two matchups here and then the final. So Genesis versus Song of Songs. I may make.
Songs and what?
Oh, sorry. I think I broke up it. Genesis and Song of Songs. Genesis, Song of Songs. Here's a bit I didn't say for Genesis before. We've got the story of Hagar, like the foreign slave woman who names God, right? That's rich and provocative and engaging and full. That I think is hard to is another. Just I'm adding that on to all that was said that I said before. So I think I'm still going to go with Genesis here, but what do other people think?
And the God who is with them too, for the advocating for the God is with everyone. He has a very strong foundational narrative from the beginning, which is very powerful.
Look, alongside with Hagar, I mean, oh gosh, there's so many things. I was reading an article that I saw via Twitter with Rabbi, I think it's Danya Ruttenberg, talking about how, we need to think about that there's, we talked about the gendered violence in Judges, but there's a complicity between Sarah and Abram, and just as Abram puts Sarah into trouble to get himself out of trouble, she also does the exact same thing with Hagar, and so that kind of that really complex network of power relations is an important thing to be looking at. You were talking about Hagar naming God. We've also got the fact where Melchizedek names God, and there's this really important idea that Auntie Reverend Denise Campion talks about in her book Anadich, where you have Abraham taking the name of God from an indigenous person, and that's really important, for us to have those sorts of stories and to read that sort of story in that way. I can't believe I'm arguing against Song of Songs. I really want to keep Song of Songs. I also want to know what the other two are before I cast my vote. I don't know. I'm torn.
I'm still gonna stay with Song of Songs. I think I've said about everything I could say about it. But the last thing I will say is that, and this is drawn from what you, Liam, and Rosie have said. You've got a book here, Genesis, that tells you who God is. But in Song of Songs, you've got a book here that's asking you to name God. It's asking you to identify who God is by way of admiring your body, the way you've been made. They said that, it says there that God created humanity in God's image. And then Song of Songs just said, well, if that's the case, have a look at yourself. And you tell me who God is, according to what you think of yourself, with your own body, with your own gender. So that's why I'm going with Song of Songs.
I think that's why I have to go with Genesis, because if I'm really sad, right? But if we didn't have these wonderful poems and creation myths, then that fundamental understanding of being made in the image of God by a creator who created creation not as some offset of war, but out of love and out of, just generosity, is something that is so foundational to then our understanding of Song of Songs. So it kind of feels like you have to have Genesis first. So my vote is for Genesis.
Can I just say, in response to your saying, because I'm going back to your original point, Amanda, you're saying that we've done such a bad job with this book, and then you've gotten to the final hurdle to say, I'm just going to side
Man,
with
you're using my words against me.
I mean, the whole point
I'm just
of
going to
this
side
game-
with everyone else now.
The whole point of this game, right, is the conceit of the fact that we can only have one book of the Bible, which, when I checked in with the wonderful Dr. Rochelle Gilmore for any tips that she had on which books should stay, she was like, well, all of them, because they're all the word of God. So
I love
I
this
would
repeat,
probably
don't
say
play like that.
Samuel, but yeah.
yeah, and I tried hard. I voted for Samuel and Daniel. I am actually going to vote for Song of Songs, despite the conversation on Genesis. I'm going Song of Songs.
That's Steff or Rod.
I think for me, it's got to be Genesis still, even though everyone's spoken very compellingly about Song of Songs. Just because in the two creation accounts in Genesis, like they complement each other so well, because there's like, is it Genesis 1 where it's like you're made in the image of God, and then Genesis 2 where it's kind of like, but the universe isn't about you. It's about God. And so I think that is it strikes a really good balance for, how to view yourself and your own self-esteem. And I think about that a lot.
Yeah, I think purely on the creation myths alone is where it hangs for me in learning about the maleness and the femaleness of God, the masculinity and the femininity going together. Also listening to Indigenous Christians talking about being formed from the dust and being inherently connected with the rest of creation. And I just love this beautiful vision of the God in contrast to other creation myths, where we have a God who steps aside and creates space for other life to flourish in a way that is motivated by love. And that's just not what we see in a lot of the other creation myths. And I think it's what sets the Hebrew God apart. And I love that.
So Genesis is going through. Song of Songs was actually one of the readings from our wedding was from Song of Songs. So, I'm sad to see it go, but Genesis goes through and we can all make more arguments for it very soon. So Genesis is going forward here. Let me write that in. And now we're going Matthew versus Revelation, first book of the New Testament versus last book, and thus a chance that if Revelation continues its strange path, we could have Genesis versus Revelation. I don't want that to sway anyone. But we could have Genesis versus Revelation. I mean, Genesis versus Matthew is also first and first. So either first and first or first and last. So I'll open it up. Matthew versus Revelation. What do we want to take?
I mean, the poetry of the Alpha Omega would be nice.
For me, it's still Matthew, just for the parables. It's just like, it's such a good book. I know that like for a lot of people, it's not their favorite gospel for various reasons. But yeah, for me, it's like great way to start the New Testament, and paints just like such rich pictures about the kingdom of God.
In an empire where the poor are completely undervalued, we get this beautiful, blessed are the poor, and these beatitudes of everyone who you've undervalued ever in every way of life is great in the kingdom of heaven. This new world and this new reign and this new empire, which contrasts with the world and the reign and the empire that you know is completely different. And this is what I'm calling you to see that is coming near, and to repent and join this alternative social society that is ruled and reigned by God, who declares blessed are the poor, and learn from the children, and become slaves when slavery is not something to be aspired to. You'll be servants of each other. There's no title, there's no hierarchy, there's no entitlement. You're all on the same level. It's a just playing field, and we're going to lift one another up. And that's the world that God and Jesus brings in, and that's what we're joining into. That's my argument for the Gospel of Matthew.
Steff took us to church.
It's a good argument.
I'm going to go Matthew.
Yeah, I don't know whether I should vote for the beginning of the appendix or the end of the appendix. So, I mean, but I don't know. I'll go with Matthew for Steff's sake.
Amanda?
Oh man, I wish Song of Songs was here.
Yeah, me too.
So look, I got to say, like, I'm kind of apathetic about these two choices in terms of, objectively looking at both of the texts. I've got to say, Revelation is just sometimes lost in obscurity. And so if we're looking at, which one should be there, then I'd have to say Matthew. So I'm going with Matthew.
Matthew's getting through.
Yep.
All right, folks. The first book of the Bible, the book of Genesis, versus the first book of the New Testament, the gospel according to Matthew. So the church decided this gospel had to go first. And if you picked up a Bible, this was the book that you were going to get introduced to, and that meant something. It's a tough one. Genesis, first, are we going to have one book left in the Bible and doesn't have Jesus in it?
Well, no, hang on. This is part of my argument for Genesis, in saying that Jesus is in Genesis. Jesus is part of the creation. Jesus has always been there. It's part of the Trinity. It's part of the Spirit that hovers over the waters, the part of the creation. And so that is why I'm voting for Genesis. And don't at me that Jesus is not there, because he is.
Well, it's called Genesis for a reason, isn't it? It's the first of everything. When you're trying to understand our monotheistic approach to worship and faith, it all begins with Genesis. And you've got the creation story, you've got all the very first elements of the narrative world that we see in the Hebrew Bible, and it all goes through all towards the New Testament. So you can have the Old Testament without the New Testament, but you can't have the New Testament without the Old Testament, right? So
a lot of publishers would disagree.
Hey, propaganda. So Genesis, for me, to take this out, we can't have a book from the appendix taking this out. We've got to have it from the Hebrew Bible.
I had a commentary on Genesis a while ago. It was probably like John Stott or somebody, equally evangelical and famous. And the kind of point that they were making about Genesis, was we can have all these various arguments about, are you going to be a 7-day creation person? Is it literal? Is it metaphorical? and that none of that, the part that mattered in Genesis was that we had to agree on was that in the beginning, God. After that, it was anybody's game. Matthew opens with a genealogy, which writing wise isn't the strongest opening. It's like, I'm not sure what our criteria for voting are here. I think that all of Steff's points about Matthew in the previous round about this vision and Rowan's too, this vision for the kingdom, the stuff on eunuchs, so the kind of social aspects, which I suppose as a sociologist and cultural studies person, that's what I should care about. As a Christian person, we kind of need in the beginning God. So I guess it goes to Genesis.
Ron?
I still do have to stick with Matthew, I think. But I don't know. I don't really have much else to add except to say that, the parables are the best.
There's a sense that, Steph, did you want to say something?
Yeah, sorry, Liam.
You go.
It's tough, isn't it? How do you, like the Hebrew scriptures, we need them. We don't have Christian scriptures without Hebrew scriptures. We don't have the story of where we came from. We don't have, it doesn't make sense, any of Matthew without Genesis. It's difficult. I think I just really love the Gospel of Matthew because it speaks to this time as well of being, of having 2% of our world controlling wealth and power, and another 10% sort of getting a share in that, and then 90% of the world doesn't get anything. They're out of the elite class. They don't have any power. And you have this alternative way of viewing the world, which, and then go and make disciples of all nations and bring them into this movement. I just have to stick with Matthew because it speaks to me so much. I think it's so relevant.
And Matthew has Emmanuel, God with us. That alone is so strong.
From Isaiah.
So yeah. so I was once many years ago an actor, and I think the most important thing to know when you're an actor and you're about to perform is what play are you in? Are you stepping in a tale of a Danish prince called Hamlet or a Scottish usurper called Macbeth? Once you know that, the rest kind of just can fumble into place. You got to know what play you're in. And Genesis tells you what play you're in. Genesis tells you that you have entered into the created world of God, a world that is a gift, a world in which we bear the image of God and thus are sent to be these kind of viceroys and ambassadors that care for it well, that continue in its unfolding creation and learn to live well together as we do, bearing that image. And when we know that, we can start to fumble through the rest. And whatever latent memories of the Gospels that we're no longer allowed to read might help us. So I am going to go for Genesis. And I guess also because I never defined what the criteria was. We've all just taken it as this is the only book we have left. And I guess in some sense, which one would I want to read more if I only could ever read one again and again and again? I think I'm going Genesis, but that's my criteria that I've made.
Totally different criteria.
Very different, right? So totally different. So let's not worry about that. So, well, anyway, I voted for Genesis, which means it's 4-2 to Genesis in the final round. And ladies and gentlemen, we can announce our winner. The book of Genesis, the first of the Bible, wins the Bible bracket. It is the best, representative something book of the Bible, Genesis. There it is. And it wins a prize to be determined later by our producers. Genesis, folks, it happened. I knew it would go far. I didn't necessarily think it was going to win. But it's great that it has. But what's been much more has been the friends we've made along the way, the journey to this point, but also like the great words we've said. Like whole books have been reframed in my mind through these conversations that I'm excited to explore again and read again with it all in mind. And I hope those who have listened, the 7 people who decided to follow this all the way through, its inordinate length.
We're determined we're going to read Malachi now.
yeah, that's right up. It's tomorrow morning. I think is great. There's been a lot of fun. So my wonderful panel, thank you for joining me. I think we got most of our plugs in before. Does anyone have anything else they want to quickly shout out now for anyone interested? Stuff will be in the bio in the show notes for anyone who wants to see that. My dear thanks for you all coming on and joining me for this. I've kept you up so late, but I've had maybe the most fun night, one of the more fun nights in lockdown. So I do appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you,
us, Liam.
and happy 100 as well.
Yeah, happy 100.
You
Raise your bet.
I know. I can't believe it. I can't believe 100 of these over some 4 or so years. Thank you for everyone who's ever listened to one or who've listened to all. Oh, that's not too many people. But I do appreciate anyone who's tuned in or shared. Maybe give this one a share or share your favorite and let me know what one that was. I will let someone else know what that was. Thank you so much. And I guess we'll be back next week with a much shorter, more true to form episode. But this has been a blast. Ladies and gentlemen, the book of Genesis reigns supreme. And yeah, see you later.